Chapter 549. Chu Yang used his control of the protective formation to observe the entire Great Adjudication Formation in the Adjudication Hall, and he had a clear outline of it in his mind. The Great Adjudication Formation wasn't like the third-grade formation he was familiar with, which had 30 formation seals, or fourth-grade formation seals, which had 40 formation seals. Instead, it was extremely simple, with only 6 master seals. Perhaps these 6 master seals are of a much higher level than the Great Adjudication Formation, or perhaps the Great Tao is the simplest. Chu Yang was unable to determine the level of these 6 master seals, but he was sure that these 6 master seals were incomparably complex and profound. He roughly knew that the 5 master seals that formed the cycle of the 5 elements were primarily metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. The central seal at the very center was the lightning seal, which was the formation seal within the lightning pool in the space below the Great Adjudication Formation. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. The extreme gives birth to lightning. The 5 master seals of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth were related to lightning, and this was in accordance with the profundities of the 5 elements sect's 5 elements. Lightning is extremely powerful, and only a virtuous, determined, and righteous person would be able to control it for their own use. Of all the spells, the most powerful were the lightning spells. Lightning is the cardinal principle of heaven and earth. Thus, lightning is the command of the heavens, and it has the greatest authority. Everything in the 3 realms and 9 lands is under the command of lightning. Chu Yang had already left his own formation seal within the lightning pool when he was wreaking havoc in the protective formation. Now that he examined it, it was even clearer, and many thoughts surfaced in his mind. Lightning was the embodiment of the heavenly authority of the heavens, and it was the law of the heavens, the judgment of the heavens, and the judgment of the heavens. This was why this formation was called the Adjudication Formation. At the very center of the lightning seal was a lightning seal. It was a heavenly book written by someone, and the language within it was completely different from the language of the mortal world. It seemed to be the language of the heavenly Tao, and it was astronomy. This was the Lightning Seal Heavenly Book. Only by obtaining the acknowledgement of the Lightning Seal Heavenly Book could one control this master seal. Chu Yang analyzed the Lightning Seal Heavenly Book, and he saw all kinds of scenes within it. He also learned that the Lightning Seal Heavenly Book would only appear after a lightning strike. There had to be a reason for the lightning punishment. Whether the lightning struck a temple, a house, a tree, a vessel, or a human being or an animal, it was not an accident. It was only because the temple, or house had evil spirits attached to it, or because there were venomous insects hiding under the trees or vessels, or because human beings or animals were unfilial and unfilial. That was why they were struck by lightning. After being struck by lightning, the Thunder Han heavenly scripture would appear on the object that was struck. It was like a judgment and ruling statement. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to recognize the Thunder Han heavenly scripture. Only those knowledgeable people or Tao experts would be able to recognize it. Thunder is the cardinal element of heaven and earth, so the lightning heavenly tome should be the cardinal element of the Great Adjudication Formation. Chu Yang didn't ask for a thorough explanation. He tried his best to memorize the Thunder Han heavenly scripture and brand it in his mind. He felt that as long as he could comprehend a few % of the Thunder Han heavenly scripture, it would be enough for him to break through to become a 4th-grade array master. "Boss, give me something to eat. Boss, give me some soup." "Yah. Little Six and Little Black said one after another. Little Guari also started to cry out. Chu Yang was able to see the Thunder Han heavenly scripture because he had partial control over the mountain protecting formation and his genius martial soul and fool martial soul. Although the 3 of them could vaguely sense the Thunder Han heavenly scripture through Chu Yang, they couldn't see it. With a smile, Chu Yang opened his consciousness to them so that they could use his perspective to comprehend the Thunder Han heavenly scripture. Rumble. After some time, a piece of paper appeared between Chu Yang's eyebrows. It was extremely unclear and covered by a dark cloud. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, like a thunder cloud in the sky. The Thunder Han heavenly scripture can't be visualized in detail. I can only visualize its general appearance. Chu Yang had already imprinted every detail of the Thunder Han heavenly scripture in his mind, but it was impossible to visualize it. After several attempts, he gave up and turned to the Great Adjudication formation. Chapter 550. Rumble. The five elements' true essence and lightning attributed true essence in his body surged like a river, rumbling as they formed 6 seals in his palm. The metal, wood, water, fire, and earth seals were relatively clear, and the thunder seal was the most blurry. Then, according to the judgment formation, he set up the formation on his hand. Immediately, the 6 types of true essence surged and gathered in his palm. The moment the formation was set up, the essence of heaven and earth was immediately swept over. Along with the cycle of the 5 elements, a 5-colored vortex first appeared in his palm, and then the vortex directly turned into a 5-colored light ball that rotated at high speed. Rumble. Thunder was born at the peak of the 5 elements. The 5-colored light ball emitted the sound of thunder and lightning, just like the thunder in heaven and earth. The Thunder Heavenly Book was the hub of the thunder technique. The thunder seal of the 6 seals in his palm could be used to control thunder and lightning. With a thought, Chu Yang raised his hand. Immediately, with a rumbling sound, a bolt of thunder struck out from his palm. It was as if thunder had descended from the heavens, striking the void. Immediately, lightning snakes danced in the void, and a dazzling lightning bolt tore through the void. The sound of thunder rumbled, resounding throughout the entire 5-element sect. If this hits a person, I'm afraid it will directly kill them. The power was extremely shocking. Just now, Chu Yang felt as if he had transformed into the heavens, sending down thunder to kill demons. The power of this bolt of thunder was extremely great. It's still not enough. At most, it can kill a 3rd or 4th level ascending soul realm cultivator. The power can be greatly increased. Although the first attempt was amazing, there were still many areas to be improved. Chu Yang's control was too slow. There were intermittent periods, and there was a big problem with the connection. The flow of energy was also intermittent. If it could be done smoothly, he felt that the power would at least be increased by several times. It should be no problem to kill an 8th or 9th level ascending soul realm cultivator. Thunder is born from the 5 elements, and the Thunder Heavenly Book controls thunder. It's such a simple process. This process seems simple, but it requires the perfect combination of the 5 seals of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, and thunder seal. Chu Yang himself couldn't create thunder from the 5 elements. He could only form it through the array. If he could create thunder from the 5 elements through the use of his true essence, this thunder technique would be more direct and faster. It would also be more violent. After all, it wouldn't need the array as a relay. Rumble. Just as Chu Yang was about to continue pondering, a dazzling flash of lightning caused him to be unable to open his eyes. Soon after, he felt his surroundings tremble. It was as if thunder had struck and the world was shaking. Why? When Xiao Guari's cry entered his ears, Chu Yang saw one of its little paws imitate him and blast out a bolt of lightning into the void. Rumble. A bolt of lightning tore through space and soared into the sky. The rumbling of thunder was deafening, as if the heavens were truly furious and had sent down a bolt of lightning. It even gave him the misconception that this bolt of lightning was not from Lil Guari, but from the heavens. This little thing is actually so astonishing, even more ridiculous than me. Chu Yang was shocked, but he soon figured it out. This little thing was proficient in the 5 elements, so it was probably able to create thunder from the 5 elements. When he looked over, he could not help but laugh involuntarily. Lil Guari had already collapsed to the ground, as if it did not have the slightest bit of strength left. The bolt of lightning just now seemed to have exhausted all of its quintessential essence, chi, and spirit. Its aura was extremely weak, and it was extremely exhausted. Its little paws were still charred black, and the faint smell of meat wafted over. Ha ha. Chu Yang couldn't help but laugh out loud. He thought to himself, this thunder technique is so astonishing, and is born from the 5 elements. Then let's call it the 5 elements thunderous hand. He came up with another extremely unreliable name. Because of the commotion he and Lil Guari had caused, the rumbling of thunder had alarmed the entire Divine Command Peak. Many disciples were attracted over. There was a formation set up by Chu Yang in the courtyard. Normally, only Chu Renxian and the other disciples of the East Arrival Pavilion could enter. However, as soon as Chu Renxian and the others entered, they immediately cried out in agony and came out charred black. He was struck by lightning. The words of the disciples outside made Chu Renxian really annoyed. What do you think? Senior brother Chu is too heaven-defying. His only cultivating, and has already caused such a huge commotion. What a joke. The strongest person of the 5 Elements sect has ganged up on the 15 peaks. Do you think I'm joking? While the disciples of the Divine Command Peak were clamoring, a rumbling voice suddenly came from afar. It was extremely oppressive, causing the surroundings to suddenly fall silent. Chu Yang, where are you? Chapter 551. Buzz. All of a sudden, the earth and sky shook, and the entire Divine Command Peak shook violently. Looking for me? In the courtyard, Chu Yang, who originally planned to continue cultivating, had a glint in his eyes. Chilliness surged in his eyes. It's not enough that I killed a guardian elder of the fire element peak. They still want to find trouble with me. You're planning to kill me, aren't you? Thoughts flashed through Chu Yang's mind. He had already displayed sufficient talent, and his performance was extremely shocking. Moreover, he was the joint successor of the Supreme Elder and Elder Huang. Logically speaking, they shouldn't dare to underestimate Chu Yang, and they shouldn't dare to act rashly. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to withstand Chu Yang's counterattack. However, they still acted. If they were to act, they definitely had sufficient confidence, and their methods would definitely be vicious. They definitely wanted to kill him. Goat, why isn't there any movement? Thinking of this, Chu Yang couldn't help but squint his eyes. Suiyun Fu was the peak master of the Divine Command Peak. The other party's aura was oppressive, and their intentions were obvious. They directly called out Chu Yang's name, so it was impossible for Suiyun Fu not to sense it. Could it be that I've already been abandoned, and Goat has already reached a compromise with them? Who is Chu Yang? The two figures had already arrived at the Divine Command Peak. They stood in the void and spoke coldly. Their voices were like a huge bell that resounded throughout the Divine Command Peak. How exactly do they plan to deal with me? Chu Yang couldn't figure it out, so he was already prepared to resist violently. Swoosh. From the courtyard, Chu Yang and Xiao Guori instantly flew out. Are you looking for me? I'm here. When he saw the two of them, Chu Yang's heart sank. The two of them were at the soul reincarnation realm, and they obviously didn't want to give him any leeway to struggle. The two guardian elders with majestic auras and extremely powerful auras didn't say anything. They descended from the void and directly pressed towards Chu Yang. They stared at him expressionlessly. You're Chu Yang? The two of us are under the orders of the presiding elder to escort you to the Hall of Judgment to await your punishment. You better not try to resist. Otherwise, you will be charged with treason and will be killed immediately. Boom. As soon as these words were spoken, it was as if a bomb had been thrown into the water. The expressions of all the disciples on the Divine Command Peak changed. All the disciples of the 5 Elements sect knew what kind of place the Great Hall of Judgment was. It could be said that the Great Hall of Judgment was a guillotine, a place of death. Of all the disciples who entered the Judgment Hall, 9 out of 10 died. Generally speaking, almost none of them were able to come out alive. Even if they did come out alive, they were mostly crippled, living a life worse than death. Great Hall of Judgment. How is that possible? The disciples of the Divine Command Peak were extremely shocked. At this moment, they knew that Chu Yang was most likely dead. Buzz. At this time, the two guardian elders of the Hall of Judgment had already released their own realms to cover Chu Yang. They said in a cold voice, "Let me give you a piece of advice. You'd better not act rashly. Soul reincarnation realm, domain. If I had resisted, I would have definitely been killed by them directly. Logically speaking, I wouldn't have died even if I died. But if I allow them to do as they please, I'm afraid I'll still die." Chu Yang secretly assessed the situation. His pupils constricted. He was absolutely no match for them with his current strength. Moreover, they clearly knew him extremely well. They had come prepared. If you want to arrest me, There should be a crime, right? When Chu Yang sensed the realms of these two, it was as if he was facing four walls that had once surrounded him. He was helpless and powerless. His violent resistance was stifled in the womb, and he could only sullenly compromise. Chen-ph. You'll naturally know once you arrive at the Hall of Judgment. All right, I'll go with you. I'd like to see what kind of dragon's pool and tiger's den this Hall of Judgment is. Chapter 552. As soon as the three of them left, the Divine Command Peak fell into chaos. Chu Yang killed the Guardian Elder of the Fire Element Peak. Even if it was a life-and-death battle, he will still be investigated. Chu Yang is the successor of the Supreme Elder and the Golden Elder. Aren't they afraid that the two elders will make things difficult for him? They are on the side of the Five Elements' divine child. With the support of the sect master, what is there to be afraid of? Chu Yang is the supreme genius of our Five Elements sect. How can they kill him? If you are not used by them, the more talented you are, the more they will want to kill you immediately to avoid endless troubles. The disciples of the Divine Command Peak discussed animatedly. Among them, there was a disciple who sneered, "Humph, maybe they will make a fool of themselves this time." Chu Yang dares to go with them. He must have some tricks up his sleeve. That's right. I guess there will be a good show to watch later. Not necessarily. Chu Yang is indeed extraordinary. But this time, they are going to fight personally. It's hard to say. They are always confident, but they always end up embarrassing themselves in the end. It went without saying who they were referring to. Let's go and take a look. How can we miss this? We must go and take a look. Let's go. The disciples of the Divine Command Peak rushed to the Judgment Peak and rushed to the Judgment Hall. Chu Yang was escorted to the Judgment Hall by the Guardian Elder of the Judgment Hall for trial. Such news quickly spread throughout the Five Elements sect, causing an uproar. Such a matter could be said to be a big deal. It was almost like a saint being escorted to the Judgment Hall for trial. After all, Chu Yang's identity was extraordinary and his talent was peerless. No one could compare to him. The moment the news spread, although the disciples of the Five Elements sect in the Judgment Peak's Judgment Hall were shocked, countless disciples of the Five Elements sect actually flocked to the Judgment Peak's Judgment Hall. The scene was shocking, like carps leaping over the Dragon Gate. They were a school of fish. The Judgment Hall seemed to be where the Dragon Gate was, so they gathered there crazily, as if they were competing to jump over the Dragon Gate. As for the exact location of the Judgment Peak, it was to the west of the Five Elements sect. This westernmost point was used as a reference by the five inner peaks. The Judgment Peak surpassed the 10 outer peaks and 5 inner peaks. It was a level higher than the 15th peak. This meant that the Judgment Peak status was higher than the 15th peak. It also meant that it had full authority over the 15th peak. The Judgment Peak was like a straight spear, and the cliffs were like sharp blades. Within 1,000 jong radius, it was lonely, and there was no other mountain that was connected to it. The entire Judgment Peak was barren, and seemed to be blood-red. From within the mountain, there was a faint smell of blood. Once one sensed it, it would make one's heart palpitate. It could be said that not a single blade of grass grew on this peak. The fierce killing intent and baleful aura cut off the vitality of all plants. Because of this, the Judgment Peak became the place that the disciples of the Five Elements sect did not want to approach the most. At this moment, the Judgment Hall had already descended from the void and landed on the mountain peak. It towered at the peak of the mountain, and the entrance to the main hall was already wide open. The dark and gloomy hole inside was eerie, as if it led to the underworld. It was terrifying. From the Judgment Hall, a flight of stairs made of molten iron appeared at this moment. It meandered down, and there were tens of thousands of stairs at the foot of the mountain. It was unknown how many years had passed since this flight of stairs was built, and it was already stained with blood. On both sides of the stairs, weapons were placed in great numbers. Swords, spears, axes, and axes all pointed towards the sky. Not only did each weapon represent killing intent, but it also seemed to represent the strict rules of the Five Elements sect. Apart from the weapons, there were many skeletons scattered all over the stairs. They rolled down along the nearly 10,000 stairs, and were scattered all over the blood-stained stairs. Among the skeletons, some were strong, some were weak, and some were strong, revealing their cultivation base. Among them, there was no lack of experts and geniuses. However, after violating the rules of the sect, they had all turned into skeletons. They could only look up at the sky with their empty eye sockets, as if they were regretting their actions. Their bones had long been integrated into the stairs, and became a part of the stairs that warned the disciples of the five-element sect. The white tiger was in charge of killing, and it was located in the west. The five-element sect placed this mountain peak in the west to correspond to the baleful aura of the white tiger. It was to warn all the disciples of the five-element sect that the consequences of betraying the sect and breaking the rules of the sect were the most direct impact. It was unknown how many skeletons had accumulated here, and the strong baleful aura and killing intent had made this place a barren land. It had also become a place where all the disciples would turn pale at the mention of it. Chapter 553. Boom. Outside the judgment hall, a dazzling ball of light fell from the sky and landed heavily on the steps in front of the judgment hall. Elder, we have brought him here. Amid rumbling sounds, the two guardian elders of the judiciary hall landed with Chu Yang. You can leave now. An aged voice with boundless authority drifted out from the judgment hall. Yes. As soon as his voice fell, the two guardian elders immediately responded and left. There was dead silence in front of the judgment hall. The moment Chu Yang landed on the ground, what entered his eyes was a white skull. Then, a blood-colored staircase appeared in his field of vision. There seemed to be no end to it, and it led straight to the judgment hall. In an instant, the surrounding aura surged. His mouth and nose were filled with the smell of blood. When he looked around, he saw a gloomy and ghostly scene. The air and the void were filled with a dense aura of death. He could even see countless vengeful spirits wailing in pain before they died. They are trying to scare me. They are trying to suppress my mental state and make me cower before the battle. Chu Yang squinted his eyes. Why didn't they bring him to the judgment hall? Why did they let him take a look at the blood-colored staircase and the surroundings? Their purpose was obvious. Although Chu Yang had never been to the judgment hall, he had already sensed the resentment, killing intent in the judgment hall through the mountain protecting array. The brilliant thunder suppressed everything in the judgment hall. However, when he saw the scene in front of him, it was more shocking than he had imagined. Rumor has it that entering the judgment hall is almost certain death. It seems that it is true. Chu Yang knew that he was in trouble. At this moment, he felt an extremely powerful and boundless aura in the judgment hall. It was like a white tiger crouching in the judgment hall, giving off boundless pressure and intimidation. When this aura fused with the judgment hall, the aura that Chu Yang emitted at this moment was like that of an ant. This must be the so-called Elder of Judgment. Today, I want to see what you can do. If you can't do it, then I'll fight to the death. Chu Yang knew in his heart that this aura belonged to the person who had brought him here, the presiding elder of the main hall of the trial peak. 7 or 8 steps up the blood-stained stairs, there were 3 silhouettes by the entrance of the judgment hall. One of them stood with his hands behind his back, looking at Chu Yang as if he was looking at a dead man. Chu Yang immediately recognized Deity. He had seen Deity before. He had never seen the other 2 people before, but this didn't prevent him from judging them at a glance. The red-haired one was the burning heaven holy sun, and the other one should be Zhao Yunlong. Chu Yang still had a very strong impression of the burning heaven holy sun. At this moment, the burning heaven holy sun was like an ice sculpture that had been frozen for 10,000 years. Especially those eyes, they were cold, callous, malicious, ruthless, and resolute. This kind of person was usually very opinionated and wouldn't be easily moved by external things. Once they made a decision, it was almost impossible to change it. At the same time, in order to succeed, they would do anything and pay any price. It's best to kill this kind of thing directly, or else the threat is too great. Chu Yang felt a great threat from the burning heaven holy sun. This kind of person could do anything. While Chu Yang was sizing up the burning heaven holy sun, the burning heaven holy sun was also sizing up Chu Yang. As the holy son of the five-element sect, he had borrowed the Soul Devourer clan to deal with Chu Yang, who was only a lowly inner disciple of the five-element sect. At that time, he already felt that it was very honorable to let Chu Yang die, but in the end, he didn't succeed. Instead, he got himself into trouble. And in the days that he left, it had only been a short period of time, but this lowly inner disciple had already changed. His identity and status were even more honorable and revered than his own. The Grand Elder and the Golden Elder, the two great elders' common disciple, the burning heaven Holy Sun wanted to see what kind of person could be in the eyes of both the Grand Elder and the Golden Elder, who dared to provoke the Holy Sun. Chapter 554. This Chu Yang must die. He must die immediately. For no reason at all, the moment he saw Chu Yang's indifferent expression made the burning heaven Saint Sun's eyelids twitch fiercely. He felt a strong sense of crisis in his heart, as if Chu Yang didn't die, he would be the next one to die. There were very few people who could make the burning heaven Holy Sun feel such an intense sense of life and death crisis at first glance. It made him immediately feel death, to the point of fear. This was a very subtle feeling. There was no reason to explain it. It was completely instinctive, but the burning heaven Saint Sun firmly believed in it. This feeling had helped him many times. The burning heaven Saint Sun also carefully sensed Chu Yang's cultivation. He was really only at the 7th level of the Chi Soul Realm, but Chu Yang could kill people at the 8th or 9th level of the Ascending Soul Realm like chickens and dogs. What made him more concerned was the aura that Chu Yang's body burst out. It was a special kind of aura. The burning heaven Saint Sun could clearly see that Chu Yang was facing the judgment hall, where everyone was terrified, and his lips were curled into a mocking smile. Facing the steps of death, the baleful aura, yin qi, resentment, and killing intent that filled the surroundings, he turned a blind eye to it, as if he was already used to it. Chu Yang seemed to be a huge boulder. No matter how strong the waves were, he would remain calm and unmoving. He was neither servile nor overbearing. He was not happy with external gains nor sorrowful. That kind of carefreeness, that kind of indolence, that kind of indifference, made the burning heaven Saint Sun's heart completely sink. He had never met such a person. If he had the chance to choose between Chu Yang and the 5 elements divine child, he would probably choose Chu Yang. Die, 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 he must die. If he doesn't die, I will be consigned to eternal damnation. I can neither live nor die. The burning heaven Saint Sun's heart was already filled with fear. He only had one thought left. Today, no matter what, Chu Yang must die here. The two of them observed each other and gave each other a high evaluation. At this moment, compared to the burning heaven Holy Sun's desire to kill, Zhao Yunlong's mood was much calmer. From Zhao Yunlong's point of view, since the burning heaven Holy Sun had personally come, then Chu Yang was already a dead man. Therefore, all he had to do now was to watch the show. As for Chu Yang, he was more curious about him now. As expected, he is extraordinary. His temperament is not inferior to the burning heaven Holy Sun at all, and is even clearly superior. No wonder Father and the others have been planning for so many years, yet they were completely defeated by him. Zhao Yunlong held a grudge against Chu Yang in his heart, but at this moment, he couldn't help but feel a sense of admiration and admiration. This was the first time he came to the judgment hall and the first time he faced the strictest and cruelest judgment elder of the 5 elements sect. He was so scared that his legs were trembling and his heart was curled up. He was so careful that it was as if he was walking on thin ice. But what about Chu Yang? Calm and collected, he even had the time to size up Chu Yang. Especially now, Chu Yang was being suppressed by the combined pressure of the trial elder and the burning heaven Holy Sun. Zhao Yunlong couldn't help but admire him. Chu Yang, how dare you? An aged voice suddenly broke the silence. It was as if thunder had suddenly torn a hole in the sky. Thunder rumbled endlessly from the judgment hall like a tsunami that could destroy the heavens and the earth. Every word that was spat out was like a huge millstone crushing down. For a moment, the entire judgment peak was buzzing and shaking, as if it couldn't bear the anger of the owner of this voice. Has it begun? Chapter 555. Disciple Chu Yang greets the presiding elder. Chu Yang calmly said, "Forgive Chu Yang's ignorance, but I don't understand why the elder is so angry. Chu Yang has always acted in accordance with the rules, and I have never overstepped my boundaries. I ask the elder to judge clearly. Ordinary disciples would pale at the mention of the presiding elder's name. They would tremble in fear and trepidation when they felt the anger of the guardian elder. But how could such a situation happen to Chu Yang? Although he still didn't know where the burning heaven saint sun was going to start. You still dare to quibble? Let me ask you, during the entrance exam, you killed Bi Xinyuan, Jiao Hongyang, and the other 8 people in the Huanmo secret realm. Do you really think no one knows? Chu Yang didn't know the names of the 8 people in the Huanmo secret realm. The presiding elder's voice was like thunder exploding in his ears. His heart skipped a beat. Not good. Did they find evidence? These 8 people were sent by Hu to kill Chu Yang. Chu Yang wasn't dead yet, so it wasn't hard to deduce that they were dead. The difficult part was finding evidence. Is that all? I did kill these 8 people, but I was only defending myself. Chu Yang secretly calculated and calmed down. May I ask the elder, who are these Bi Xinyuan and Jiao Hongyang? Are they disciples participating in the exam, or disciples in charge of maintaining order during the exam? If he didn't do anything wrong, he wouldn't be afraid of ghosts knocking on his door in the middle of the night. Chu Yang's appearance made the burning heaven saint sun frown. How could he not know the real situation? This question was very tricky. If they weren't disciples participating in the exam, and if they weren't disciples in charge of maintaining order, then what was their purpose in entering the Huanmo secret realm? Chu Yang, you really have a sharp tongue. Unfortunately, it's useless. As the burning heaven holy sun sneered, the trial elder's angry rebuke was like thunder, rumbling, impudent. Am I interrogating you, or are you interrogating me? Chu Yang narrowed his eyes. Since the presiding elder dared to call him here to interrogate him face to face, it was naturally not as simple as catching wind and chasing shadows. But so what? Presiding elder, how dare you? Are you going to stop me from speaking? If you say black is black, then white is white, right? Chu Yang stood outside the Great Hall of Judgment with a smug look on his face. Then why do you still need a trial? Just come and kill me. So direct. So bold. The burning heaven saint sun's eyelids twitched. He finally witnessed Chu Yang's audacity and sharp tongue. It was more than 100 times better than what he had heard. The 5 Elements sect's disciples didn't even dare to breathe loudly after being questioned by the presiding elder. They were all trembling with fear. How could there be someone like Chu Yang who retorted and mocked back like this? He was truly audacious and didn't play according to common sense at all. He had completely disrupted their rhythm. What made the burning heaven saint sun especially shocked was that Chu Yang was too good at manipulating people's hearts. Judging Chu Yang in the Great Hall of Judgment caused too much of a commotion and attracted many 5 Elements sect's disciples. Chu Yang's words gave them a preconceived idea to let everyone know that everything they did was to put Chu Yang to death. Looking at the Great Hall of Judgment, the burning heaven saint sun was once again anxious. Normally, which 5 Elements sect's disciple would dare to go to the Great Hall of Judgment? But at this moment, it attracted the attention of so many disciples. Chu Yang's reputation was too great right now. Judging him was like judging the god's child, which was why he had such influence now. Shut up. The presiding elder was furious. The entire Great Hall of Judgment trembled because of this. Above the Great Hall of Judgment, there was even a dark golden light that bloomed. A brilliant might pressed down and an invisible cover covered Chu Yang. Immediately, he was like a chicken or dog in a cage. The presiding elder's domain had already covered Chu Yang. Chu Yang was once again shocked. Wasn't this table manners a bit too unsightly? The burning heaven saint sun's unscrupulousness far exceeded his imagination. Yeah. Of course, Lil Guari sensed all of this. It also sensed the terrifying pressure from the presiding elder. If it was an ordinary person, they would have already knelt there and could only tremble without being able to speak. Chapter 556. Chu Yang calmed it down. At the same time, he knew that today's matter would be difficult to resolve, so he prepared himself for the worst. If he had the qualifications to challenge someone at the soul reincarnation realm, he was sure that the presiding elder would be very polite in front of him. The surrounding 5 Elements disciples were in an uproar. Was this forcing Chu Yang to admit his guilt? Their reactions affected the presiding elder to a certain extent. Chu Yang, I'm warning you for the last time. If you dare to disrespect me again, don't blame me for being ruthless. Within the hall, the golden light flickered again. The domain did not retract, and the presiding elder's cold and emotionless voice came from the hall. It was filled with killing intent. Yes, elder. People had no choice but to lower their heads under the eaves. Chu Yang could only lower his head now. Chu Yang, you don't need to argue anymore. You killed Bi Xinyuan, Jiao Hongyang, and 8 others in the Huanmo mystic realm. You also killed Yi Kangjian, Ding Wuji, and 4 others in the Thunder realm. Don't even think about escaping from such crimes. Right now, in front of the elder, you're about to die, yet you still don't know how to repent. The Burning Sky Saint Sun's cold voice came down from the stairs. At this moment, he personally stood out to confront Chu Yang. Chu Yang's gaze turned cold. The one who wanted to kill him with the help of the Soul Devourer clan disciples was the Burning Sky Saint Sun. At this moment, seeing that the Burning Sky Saint Sun wanted to borrow the 5 Elements sect's rules and discipline to join hands with the presiding elder to get rid of him, how could he not be angry? Burning Sky Saint Sun, right? Chu Yang looked at the Burning Sky Saint Sun playfully. May I ask, in what capacity are you speaking? Are you a victim or an investigator? What does this have to do with you? Who are you trying to disgust with your righteousness? Do you have the right to speak? At that moment, Chu Yang pointed the gun at the burning Heaven Holy Sun and said to the Judgment Hall, Elder, the Judgment Hall is sacred and inviolable. It is not a place for cats and dogs to bark. I ask that elder restrain yourself and not let unrelated people come in to cause trouble. The surrounding disciples were once again in an uproar, but it was only for an instant. With Chu Yang's status, he really did have the qualifications to say such words. Moreover, his words were reasonable. What did this have to do with the Holy Sun of the burning heaven? Why were you so impatient? Were you afraid that a passerby wouldn't know your intentions? When everyone looked at the burning Heaven Holy Sun again, their gazes were different. Some people had already started discussing. Even the Burning Sky Holy Sun has personally come. Could this be the God-child's intention? Didn't the Son of God say that he would give Chu Yang half a year's time? Why is he acting now? He's afraid. Chu Yang is the #1 person in the 5 Elements sect. He can kill an elder at the Chi Soul realm and send the giant Peak's Peak Master flying with a punch. The 5 Elements Divine Son is already feeling guilty. Half a year is too long for him. If he doesn't act now, he's afraid that a long night will bring trouble. Chu Yang is the successor of the Grand Elder and the Golden Elder. Doesn't the Son of God have any scruples? As these discussions rang out, the burning Heaven Holy Sun's expression couldn't help but change. Shut up. Right or wrong, I have my own decisions. Why do I need you to argue? Do I need you to tell me how to do things? The Judgment Elder's stern and cold voice rumbled into Chu Yang's ears. Especially when it was countless times more majestic than before, Chu Yang instantly felt suffocated. If he hadn't clashed with the zither music Saint Child's spiritual sense before, he would have been forced to his knees by the pressure. His martial soul was extraordinary. It was a spiritual world with Xiantian apertures. His martial soul had yet to be upgraded, so there would always be limitations. The pressure of the soul wheel realm was too great, especially when Chu Yang was in the Judgment Elder's domain. Chapter 557. You want to know who the Holy Son of Burning Heaven is right now and what qualifications he has to speak. Very well, I'll let you know now. The presiding elder's voice quickly came from the Judgment Hall again. It was cold and incomparably cruel. Burning Heaven Holy Son, since you've come to provide evidence, then tell me the whole story. The Holy Son of Burning Heaven was originally a bit angry because the presiding elder insisted on dragging him into this, but now he felt that the presiding elder had foresight. If it wasn't for him, normal people wouldn't have been able to deal with Chu Yang. My identity, Chu Yang. Listen well. The Holy Son of Burning Heaven sneered. I'm the one who redressed the grievances of the disciples you killed. I'm here to seek justice for them. The heavens are clear. Chu Yang, You've lost your mind and recklessly slaughtered the disciples of the same sect. Do you really think the heavens don't have eyes? Dong. The holy son of burning heaven pressed towards Chu Yang and took a step forward. With a loud dong sound, the entire divine command peak shook as if it had jumped up. Then, the ghost orb in his hand lit up, and suddenly a dazzling light shone. Within it, the three scenes of Chu Yang killing Bi Xinyuan, Jiao Hongyang, Yi Kangjian, and Ding Wuji all appeared very clearly. Boom! In an instant, all the disciples of the Five Elements sect were in an uproar. Chu Yang really did kill Bi Xinyuan and the others. He didn't lie at all. That's the ghost orb. I recognize it. The scenes inside must be real. He killed Yi Kangjian and the others as easily as killing chickens. Ding Wuji's eyes of petrification couldn't do anything to Chu Yang and was still killed. He's really terrifying. The holy son of burning heaven couldn't help but sneer as he heard the discussions. He said, Chu Yang, what else do you have to say now? Chu Yang's expression didn't change, and he met burning heaven's holy son's gaze with an indifferent face. Are you sure that you are really the one who redressed the injustice, and not the one who pushed the victim to death? After saying that, Chu Yang looked at Ndehu and smiled. Ndehu, you have to think carefully. Are you going to be the scapegoat or are you going to tell me everything? These people were all sent by Ndehu to kill Chu Yang. None of them should be related to the burning heaven holy son. However, only the burning heaven holy son was allowed to frame him, while Chu Yang was not allowed to frame him. What a joke. The moment these words left his mouth, another commotion broke out among the Five Element sect's disciples. That's right. Chu Yang is the unparalleled Saint Sun's younger brother. The burning sky Saint Sun has enmity with the unparalleled Saint Sun. No wonder the burning sky holy sun is so kind. Chu Yang's rhetorical question is sharp and piercing. Chu Yang's words immediately changed the direction of the situation, causing the burning heaven holy sun's face to instantly turn as black as the bottom of a pot. At this moment, the presiding elder's cold voice suddenly exploded. It was like a flood that completely extinguished the small flames that were ignited by the crowd. Chu Yang, what else do you have to say now? TSK. Chu Yang despised him in his heart. The presiding elder's every word was to force him to confess and then chop him to death. Of course I have something to say. Chu Yang's expression was indifferent as he looked at the presiding elder. He said in a clear voice, Elder, have you killed anyone before? The presiding elder had not only killed people before. The number of Five Element sect's disciples that died in his hands was at least 100. The crowd didn't understand the meaning of this sentence, but they completely understood the next sentence. Elder, you are guilty because you killed someone, right? Boom. The Five Element sect's disciples were once again in an uproar. In the image, Chu Yang was killed, but was Chu Yang guilty? What if Chu Yang killed people in self-defense? Chapter 558. It was full of flaws and couldn't even withstand a single blow. With just a few words, Chu Yang completely destroyed the evidence that the burning heaven holy sun had meticulously prepared. Nothing was left of it. The burning heaven's holy sun's face immediately turned sinister. Chu Yang's face was bright as he looked over with a sneer. Burning heaven's holy sun, please remember this. Next time, when you're preparing, you better straighten out the cause and effect. If you can find an excuse, don't leave such a big flaw, or else you'll embarrass yourself. Impudent. Chu Yang, are you trying to show off in front of me? The presiding elder shouted impudent, and an invisible force was extremely violent. Like a whip, it fiercely whipped Chu Yang's body. Immediately, Chu Yang let out a muffled groan as his body swayed a few times. Then, a stream of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. His face was as pale as paper, but he didn't make a sound. However, the sneer in his eyes was even more obvious. Presiding elder, so the judgment hall isn't a place that talks about rules, but strength, a place that talks about fists, right? Chu Yang's voice echoed. Then, he said to the people of the Five Elements sect in a clear voice, Senior brothers and sisters, if your methods were better, then I, Chu Yang, would have nothing to say even if I were to be killed. However, I'm a bit unconvinced by your clumsy methods. I don't know if you'll encounter such a situation in the future. Now, I'm going to test myself and show my senior martial brothers and sisters. Let's see how the Judgment Hall handles the case. Senior brothers and sisters, if you encounter such a situation in the future, you should be mentally prepared. Boom. Chu Yang's words were interrupted. A powerful pressure broke through the air and blasted him away. A cold, emotionless voice echoed in the air. The evidence is conclusive. Chu Yang, you're still trying to deny it. You're even more guilty. Haha. Chu Yang was spurting blood from his mouth and nose. His chest had caved in, but he kept laughing to himself. That's right. Elder of the Judgment Hall, do it more savagely. Let everyone see how you've always been the Elder of the Judgment Hall. At the same time, you can use this opportunity to properly explain to everyone what the true nature of the five-element sect's rules and precepts are. Yes, that's right, it's the fist. He staggered to his feet and stared coldly at the Judgment Hall. Then, he pointed at his chest and said, Come over here. I, Chu Yang, am not as strong as you. Today, I will accept my fate of dying here. A somewhat hoarse voice resounded. The entire place was deathly silent, not a single sound could be heard. Chu Yang's few words were more effective than any move. Where there was no order, power was greatest. Where there was order, reason was the most important. The Judgment Hall was the place where the five-element sect's order was maintained. It was also the guardian and defender of the five-element sect's order. However, the Elder of the Judgment Hall had publicly trampled on all of this in front of everyone in the five-element sect. The consequences could be imagined. The Elder of the Judgment Hall would completely lose its credibility. The entire Judgment Hall would also lose its credibility and become a decoration. The five-element sect's disciples would follow the rules of their fists. The entire five-element sect would be no different from a demonic sect in the future. This was the price they had to pay for killing Chu Yang. The Burning Sky Saint Sun's expression changed greatly. If this was the case, even if Chu Yang died, he and the Elder of the Judgment Hall would definitely die. Otherwise, where would the credibility of the five-element sect be? The entire five-element sect would be in chaos. If this was the result, the sect master of the five-element sect would kill him. The five-element divine sun would also kill him so that he could use his blood to wash away all of this. You can't kill him. You absolutely can't kill him. The Burning Sky Saint Sun was already sweating. The situation was completely out of control. It was completely different from what he had imagined. At this moment, the situation was already at daggers drawn. Chu Yang's lips touched his lips and directly forced the Elder of the Judgment Hall into a corner. There was no way out. Chu Yang's mouth was too sharp. It was even more powerful than a sword. In a panic, the Burning Sky Saint Sun immediately stood up and said, Elder, please forgive me for saying a few words. Chapter 559. Massacring the entire Zhao clan. He, Chu Yang, had only killed Zhao Ba and a few others. Even the Coiling Dragon Martial Arts Institute didn't say that he had massacred the entire Zhao clan when they pursued the matter. It was so shocking and clumsy that it made people laugh. Haha. Chu Yang couldn't help but laugh out loud. Saint Child Burning Heaven, have you heard of this saying? Don't be afraid of a godlike opponent, but fear a pig-like teammate. He directly pointed at the Saint Child Burning Heaven. You are a pig-like teammate. This accusation is even more ridiculous and stupid than the previous one. Afterwards, Chu Yang kept on cursing like a string of pearls. Are you a moron? You can easily find out the truth of me massacring the Zhao clan. Only you would dare to say it. Did you forget to take your medicine today? I already reminded you to do your homework before coming out to make a fool of yourself. But my words are still warm, and you come out to make a fool of yourself. Aren't you afraid of losing face? Aren't you afraid of my aesthetic fatigue and disgust? It's not your fault that you are stupid. It's the problem of the heavens. But you still came out to show your stupidity. Isn't that right, Saint Child Burning Heaven? A pig-like teammate. You're a moron, you forgot to take your medicine, you're an idiot, and you're still showing off your stupidity. Everyone's nerves were still tense at first, but after hearing Chu Yang's scolding, they relaxed. Everyone felt that this serious matter had become somewhat improper. Everyone was speechless. In any case, that was how they felt. As for their opinion, there was no need to look anymore. They already believed Chu Yang's words. Because the saint child burning heaven's actions were truly too laughable. He only used his mouth to convict. No one was a fool. Who couldn't see that he was taking things out of context? He only used one paragraph to frame Chu Yang and wanted to put Chu Yang to death. If he couldn't even take out the cause and effect of the entire matter, how could he gain the trust of others? The saint child burning heaven was scolded until his face turned red, purple, and then green. His face was full of various colors. When the saint child burning heaven couldn't get off the stage, the presiding elder immediately came to rescue him. Chu Yang, how dare you? Is this the place for you to spout filth? The presiding elder immediately shouted, Zhao Yunlong, disciple is here. Zhao Yunlong trembled as he stood up. The situation had actually turned out like this. The judgment elder and burning heaven's holy son were rendered speechless by Chu Yang's rebuttal. Earlier, you said that your entire Zhao family was killed by Chu Yang. Is that true? Elder, this matter is absolutely true. This disciple is not lying at all. Zhao Yunlong was ready to throw caution to the wind. His speech became smoother as he knelt down with a putong sound. Elder, please seek justice for my Zhao family and the 1,000 or so innocent souls. This disciple will definitely repay you in his next life. Tears flowed down his cheeks. Every word was filled with blood and tears. Those who heard him were moved. Chu Yang, what else do you have to say? Yaya. The presiding elder pressured again. Lil Guori finally couldn't endure it any longer. On Chu Yang's shoulder, it directly pointed at the presiding elder in the judgment hall and criticized him with righteous indignation. Everyone immediately went into an uproar. Even a little beast can see that this is incomparably preposterous. Can't the presiding elder see it? Chu Yang killed the entire Zhao clan. Did he just say that he was going to kill the entire Zhao clan? What about the cause and effect? Did Chu Yang go and kill people for no reason? If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. The ancients didn't deceive me. Today, I clearly saw the faces of our 5 elements sect's elder and holy son. Indeed, if you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. If everything Chu Yang said was just sophistry, wouldn't it all be found out after an investigation? What about the investigation? Is there nothing? This is truly preposterous. Outside the judgment hall, the disciples of the 5-element sect buzzed and clamored. When the burning heaven holy son, Zhao Yunlong, and Endehu heard this, their expressions immediately changed. They felt like they had become the target of public criticism, and thousands of people cursed and thousands of people spurned them. The presiding elder's mood was 10,000 times worse. Lil Guori had caused him to completely lose face and pressure. From today onwards, he was only a butcher and no longer the presiding elder of the 5-element sect. Where did this bastard come from? How dare he be so impudent here? Chapter 560. Xiao Guori. Chu Yang was both shocked and furious. The corners of his eyes were about to tear apart. He struggled to rush out of the Judgment Elder's domain to save Xiao Guori, but the surrounding space suddenly froze, and he couldn't move. Under the effect of the domain, Chu Yang was like amber. Evil creature, you still want to escape. A shout shook the entire Judgment Peak. Chu Yang wanted to save Xiao Guori, but he was accused of escaping. Not only that, the Judgment Elder's methods were very ruthless. Endless pressure from the domain attacked from all directions, constantly squeezing Chu Yang. Blood flowed out from his eyes, ears, and nose. All the bones in his body cracked, and he didn't know how many were broken. But he didn't kill Chu Yang, in order to prevent Chu Yang from causing trouble, so he crippled Chu Yang first. After all, Chu Yang's strength was indeed extraordinary. Who knew what kind of power he could explode with in a life-and-death situation? Chu Yang, in the name of the presiding elder, I now pronounce your sentence. The presiding elder severely injured Chu Yang. Then, he released the restrictive spell and cut the Gordian knot. He immediately pronounced the verdict. His voice seemed to come down from the 9 heavens, reverberating throughout the entire judgment peak. At this moment, the heaven and earth seemed to be frozen, and everyone present was also speechless, as if they were also frozen in ice. Chu Yang, you have killed many people, and slaughtered the coiling Dragon Zhao clan. You have committed a heinous crime, and are unpardonable. You slandered the saint, spoke rudely, and insulted the elders. You are punished for several crimes. I, as the Judgment Elder, represent the 5 Elements sect to clean up the sect, cripple your cultivation, and execute you on the spot as a warning to others. The completely cold voice seemed to have floated down from another world. It was rude and overbearing, and it completely sentenced Chu Yang to death. Ha ha ha! Chu Yang looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. His laughter was filled with endless anger. Streaks of blood crawled out from his eyes, and they were filled with bone-deep hatred. He stood up with difficulty. This is the Judgment Elder of the 5 Elements sect. This is the fairness and justice of the 5 Elements sect. These are the rules and commandments of the 5 Elements sect. Chu Yang first pointed at the burning heaven holy sun, then pointed at the presiding elder in the judgment hall. He gritted his teeth and said, "Little Guari, if anything happens, I swear that all of you will die. And the 2 of you will have to kneel in front of its tombstone for all eternity." As soon as these words were spoken, it was earth-shattering and earth-shattering. Everyone was shaken to the point where their nerves went numb. Under such circumstances, Chu Yang still went crazy. Not to mention the burning sky holy sun, just the presiding elder. The presiding elder had a revered status and great authority. He had the power to decide the life and death of the disciples of the sect. All the disciples were extremely respectful in front of the presiding elder. Since the establishment of the 5 Elements sect, there had never been a disciple who dared to say that they wanted to kill the presiding elder. They even wanted him to kneel and apologize. Hiss. The people of the 5 Elements sect who were paying attention to this trial, whether they were in the open or in the dark, could not help but suck in a long breath of cold air. At the moment of life and death, Chu Yang was so fearless. Just this courage alone was not something that ordinary people could compare to. No wonder the burning heaven holy sun and the others could not kill him time and time again. He does have the qualifications. Let's not talk about cultivation first. Just this courage alone is enough to make people admire him. If he can survive, I'm afraid that even the 5 Elements divine son will not be his opponent in the future. He is loyal, courageous, and courageous. Just for a little beast, he is so angry. How dare you? With a loud roar, it was as if the heavens and earth were collapsing. Waves of terrifying pressure rushed out of the judgment hall like thousands of soldiers and horses, as if they were going to slaughter the world. Buzz. The entire judgment peak seemed to be unable to withstand this tyrannical pressure and began to tremble. At the entrance of the judgment hall, an old man with messy hair like a lion's mane and a wide mouth appeared in front of everyone like a god from the 9 heavens. This was the presiding elder. He was tall like a mountain at this moment. Standing there, he seemed to be an insurmountable gap between the heavens and the earth. His eyes were piercingly cold. Wherever his gaze landed, it would be as if the place had fallen into a bitter cold and was covered in ice and snow. I have been in charge of the presiding elder for more than 30 years. I have cleaned up the sect and killed more than 1,000 traitors. Right or wrong, I have my own judgment. Do I need you to teach me? You are just a little core disciple. You have committed unpardonable crimes. Even now, you still do not repent and dare to speak disrespectfully. Adding crimes on top of crimes, die. Boom. Chapter 561. The sky was filled with lightning, and the huge lightning palm pressed down. Seeing that Chu Yang was about to be suppressed by the palm and turned into dust, the world was deathly silent. At this moment, everyone couldn't help but feel a little suffocated, and fear appeared in their eyes. The trial elder was in charge of the rules of the 5 Elements sect. His reputation was forged by his cold and ruthless methods and the blood of countless disciples. Today, this kind of reputation was greatly provoked. If he took a step back, it would definitely collapse, but if he took a step forward, his reputation might be even greater. He didn't have much choice. Boom. At this moment, a strange change occurred. A copious amount of energy gushed into Chu Yang's body from under his feet. Suddenly, his whole body bloomed with endless rays of light. Then, a thunderous rumbling sound spread from his body. Everyone saw Chu Yang in the midst of the thunder and lightning. He casually raised his hand, and calmly went up to meet the attack. When the two came into contact, the trial elder's huge thunder and lightning palm fell down. Then, it strangely burst like a bubble. Rumble. In an instant, the lightning was dazzling, and the sound of thunder rumbled. The light and sound were released endlessly, drowning everything in the world and covering all senses. It was as if there was a huge sun of thunder rising there, and nothing could be seen. All of this was short-lived, and the result came out very quickly. Chu Yang's figure quickly appeared in front of everyone again. Chu Yang didn't die. Ka. From there, the sound of bones connecting could be heard. Chu Yang was healing his injuries. At the same time, at this moment, something rose up from the bottom of the mountain. Everyone looked over, and to their surprise, it was the five-colored little beast that was slapped down by the trial elder. At this moment, the five-colored little beast was wrapped in five-colored light. It could be seen that there were streaks of lightning energy entering Lil Guari's body from the trial peak. This was the space below the trial formation, the lightning pool's lightning energy, the aura of life force. The heavenly tribulation liquid was plundered clean by Chu Yang not long ago. Now, it couldn't give birth to such a divine object, but the lightning energy contained in it was all plundered by Chu Yang. Burning heaven's holy sun pig, judgment elder old dog, do you really think you've won? Chu Yang's ice-cold voice rang out. Although it was not loud, it resounded in every single one of the people's nerves. Within this ice-cold voice, they could see monstrous anger and killing intent. It was as if there was a demon that had not been killed yet, revealing its ferocity and horror. At this moment, the heavens and earth were silent once more. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Chu Yang without blinking. What happened? How did Chu Yang do it? How did he create such a miracle? No one knew. Even the presiding elder and the others did not understand. Chu Yang's magical power, which was similar to a regeneration technique, and the powerful self-healing ability of his body were fully displayed in front of everyone at this time. After a burst of bone-connecting sounds, his body burst out with a bloody light, and his injuries were healed completely. His whole body floated up from the stairs out of thin air, and an extremely simple array formation appeared under his feet. There were only 6 array seals in the array. 5 of them formed a cycle, and in the end, they became the control center. This was the outline of the trial formation. Ever since Chu Yang stepped into the divine command peak, he had attempted to control the trial formation. Now, everything was finally under his control. The formation was him, and he was the formation. Earlier, he had also borrowed the power of the trial formation to block the presiding elder's attack. You should rejoice. Lil Guari's injuries are very heavy, but he's not dead. Chu Yang's ice-cold voice rang out once more. His voice was much weaker than the furious and oppressive voice of the presiding elder, but it made people tremble even more. It was like the voice of the god of death. Not bad. I spent quite a bit of time earlier, but now, please tell me, how do you want to die? Chu Yang's tone suddenly became serious as he said the last sentence. Then, with a loud bang, huge ripples spread out from his body. Rumble. The heavens shook and the earth shook. Above the firmament, a thunderbolt struck down brazenly like a huge axe, and mysteriously hovered above Chu Yang's head. It didn't seem like the usual thunderbolts that flashed and disappeared. Instead, it seemed like a divine weapon that had stopped there. Crackle. 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 Chu Yang's body flickered with lightning, and his entire body was wrapped in thunder. A blurry piece of paper appeared in his hand, and after that, the power of thunder surged in crazily, turning into a sword of thunder, which Chu Yang grasped. Chapter 562. What? At the entrance of the Judgment Hall, the presiding elder and the burning sky Saint Sun finally couldn't contain the uneasiness and fear in their hearts. Their bodies trembled as a bone-piercing chill seeped through their bodies. Their entire bodies were ice-cold, as if they had fallen into an ice cave. They couldn't believe the scene in front of them. Just as Chu Yang was about to be killed by them, Chu Yang suddenly appeared in front of them like a beggar transforming into a celestial emperor, bringing with him endless divine might. Until now, they still didn't understand what was going on, let alone what had happened. As for what Chu Yang had done, they had no way of knowing. The unknown made them even more terrified. You guys are very surprised, right? This time, Chu Yang wasn't as cold as before. The corner of his mouth even curled into a smile, scare. Everyone was so shocked that they retreated a dozen steps. The scene was chaotic. You guys should be surprised. I'll give you time to carefully feel this kind of horror. His words were even more mocking as he coldly looked at the burning sky saint sun and the presiding elder. Don't worry, I guarantee that you'll regret it even after you become ghost. You're about to die, yet you still dare to boast shamelessly and impudently. Playing tricks in front of me, die. It was unknown whether the presiding elder was frightened or ignorant. He angrily rebuked and attacked again, shaking heaven and earth. However, he suddenly let out a miserable shriek. Lines of lightning appeared on his body, binding him layer by layer. In the end, they formed a large net that trapped his entire body. It was as if he was going to be cut into pieces as his flesh was pulled out piece by piece. Cracking sounds also came from his body. In just an instant, who knew how many bones in his body were broken? Blood flowed out from his 7 orifices. His face was distorted and terrifying. He was howling miserably like a malicious spirit that was being fried in a pot of oil. His voice was very mournful. Presiding elder, let me give you a friendly reminder. This is no longer your domain, but mine. So please cooperate and make a fearful expression. Otherwise, I'll be unhappy. After a pause, Chu Yang's cold, bloodshot eyes looked at the presiding elder. He asked with a clear voice, now, I'll use your own methods against you. Presiding elder, please tell me how you feel. You. The trial elder was completely terrified. He hurriedly tried to release his domain. He succeeded and couldn't help but feel a burst of ecstasy. He immediately said angrily, evil creature, you're celebrating too early. You don't have the qualifications to cut me into 1,000 pieces. Boom. His entire domain was released, and instantly enveloped Chu Yang. However, at this moment, the entire judgment peak shook, and an even larger light barrier appeared, enveloping his domain. Immediately, his domain was petrified, and completely solidified. The presiding elder was completely petrified. At this time, Chu Yang laughed again. Elder of the judgment, you seem to be very happy just now, right? Now, you've suddenly fallen from heaven to hell. The feeling must be very profound. Does it feel wonderful? Impossible, this is impossible. The trial elder roared and struggled, but his domain couldn't move at all. It was like an eggshell, completely useless. Elder of the judgment, you like to bully people with your cultivation level, right? Then I'll cripple you first, and at the same time, let me see how powerful your domain is. Chu Yang raised his hand, and made a grabbing motion in the void. Then, a series of crisp cracking sounds were heard. The Elder of Judgment's domain was like a glass cover. Numerous cracks appeared on its surface. Then, it completely collapsed. Ah! The trial elder also cried out. From his body, there were a few explosive sounds, and his entire body was like a cracked porcelain, as if it would shatter into a pile with a light touch. His aura also fell like a fall off a cliff. 5th level of the Soul Wheel Realm, 4th level of the Soul Wheel Realm, 3rd level of the Soul Wheel Realm. In the end, he fell through the Soul Wheel Realm and fell to the 8th level of the Ascending Soul Realm. Only then did the fall of his cultivation level stop. The trial elder was crippled by Chu Yang. The soul wheel in his body was like an egg, and all of them were crushed. The entire place was silent. The trial elder that everyone in the 5 Elements sect feared was crippled just like that, and this was just the beginning. The more teasing Chu Yang was now, the more furious he was. He was now extremely fierce. If someone came out to suppress Chu Yang later, he might betray the 5 Elements sect and kill everyone. If that's the case. Chapter 563. The so-called domain is nothing much. Am I right, presiding elder? There was no sound in the surroundings. The reversal was too sudden. Not only did Chu Yang not die, but he also crippled the presiding elder. Until now, no one on the scene knew how Chu Yang suddenly possessed such incomparably powerful strength. No one was able to shake him. The presiding elder's face was ashen. Winner takes all. He had lost. He had completely lost. Even if he didn't die today, he wouldn't be able to control the presiding elder anymore. Great Adjudication Array. You are controlling the Great Adjudication Array. All of a sudden, the deathly grey eyes of the presiding elder blossomed with life. He cried out in alarm, and his pupils began to tremble. His hair stood on end, and he was completely horrified. Chu Yang had actually mastered the Judgment Peak's Great Formation. If the Great Adjudication Array was fully activated, not to mention the ordinary disciples of the Five-Element Sect, even the sect leader of the Five-Element Sect would be powerless to resist if he fell into the Great Adjudication Array. He could only accept the judgment. After all, the Great Adjudication Hall existed to restrain the sect leader of the Five-Element Sect. The presiding elder didn't have the authority to touch such an array. There was only one person who could control it, and that was the presiding elder. But now, the Great Adjudication Array that could judge the sect leader of the Five-Element Sect was actually controlled by Chu Yang. Chu Yang actually controlled the Great Adjudication Array. How was this possible? The presiding elder couldn't believe it. He had thought of this before, but he overturned it because it was impossible. However, the reality was as such. Chu Yang could only control him if he controlled the Great Adjudication Array. He could crush his domain and cripple his soul reincarnation realm cultivation with a raise of his hand. Presiding elder, you are indeed very wise. You even managed to discover this. Chu Yang laughed mockingly. However, I'm sorry. Presiding elder, I took a little too long, which caused you to release all your arrogance. I would like to express my sincerest apology to you. It was true. Chu Yang actually controlled the Great Adjudication Array. How was this possible? The Great Adjudication Array was the array that could judge the sect leader of the Five-Element Sect. How could Chu Yang control it? It was so shocking that it was like a fantasy story. This was absolutely impossible. Therefore, when all the elders of the trial court cried out in alarm, the crowd simply couldn't believe it. The burning sky holy sun's eyes bulged out like a dead fish. He trembled as if his entire body was twitching. How could he have imagined that Chu Yang would have such means to be able to control the Great Adjudication Array? Even the divine sons did not have such abilities, but Chu Yang did. His intuition wasn't wrong. Chu Yang was indeed very shocking and dangerous. However, his intuition wasn't good enough. He wasn't able to detect all of Chu Yang's terrors. At this time, Zhao Yunlong was already in despair. And Deity was already lying limp on the ground. Haha. Chu Yang glanced at the four people's frightened faces and laughed out loud. You're capable, you're mighty, you're evil, I invite you to continue. His loud laughter made everyone hold their breaths. Judgment Elder, my fist is the strongest now. I represent the moon to judge you. Do you have any objections? Chu Yang began to play a game of cat and mouse. Chu Yang, you have committed a crime. You have disrupted the Five-Element Sect. The sect leader will definitely not allow you to be so arrogant. The presiding elder roared angrily. Chu Yang disdainfully said something that no one understood. Why don't you just say that your father is Li Gang? So what if he was the sect leader of the Five-Element Sect? If the Five-Element Sect wanted to kill him, he would still kill the sect leader of the Five-Element Sect. Chapter 564. Wang. After a buzzing sound, the rumbling of thunder resounded throughout the entire Five-Element Sect. In an instant, pressure from all directions pressed down on the Judgment Elder, the burning Heaven Holy Sun, and Zhao Yunlong, forcing them to kneel. And Deity did not fall into this category. He had already gone limp and was kneeling on the ground. Ah! The Trial Elder and Burning Heaven's Holy Sun both roared furiously. They struggled and resisted with all their might, and the bones in their bodies made cracking sounds. Humph! Chu Yang coldly harumphed, I'm now representing the moon to judge all of you. Since you dare to resist, I'll break all of your legs. With a single thought, the power of the grand array bombarded the legs of the 3 elders. In an instant, the 3 elders' calves exploded, and bone fragments flew everywhere. Bang, bang, bang. The 3 of them immediately knelt down in front of Chu Yang. They were extremely humiliated and filled with hatred. They had actually fallen into such a situation. Hate, right? That's right. If you don't hate, how can I be happy? Chu Yang sneered. I've seen your unwillingness. I'm also very satisfied. It's exactly the same as my appearance just now. I thought that you would be different from me. You've really disappointed me. Everyone was speechless. Chu Yang had really gone too far, but they found that they couldn't bring themselves to hate him. They just wanted to laugh. It was as if Chu Yang had a special trait that could instantly turn serious, bloody, and cruel matters into jokes. But if you really treat it as a joke, then you'll really become a joke. Who could not hear the monstrous anger hidden in Chu Yang's words at this moment? Such anger was due to the presiding elder. Their methods were too despicable and too crude. You could fabricate a crime, and at best you could come up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, and so on. However, did the presiding elders present evidence and reason? None. He didn't say that he could convince Chu Yang and convince the onlookers. He didn't even straighten out the ins and outs of Chu Yang's crime. Although the Burning Sky Saint Child and the others were arguing that Chu Yang had committed an extremely heinous crime, to the point that it was extremely shocking, he could only take out a ghost soul pearl and use his mouth as evidence. How could he convince others? In the name of the moon, the trial begins now. Ever since I was young, I've dealt with all of you little fish cleanly and efficiently. Chu Yang looked at Ndehu and said, Ndehu, in the name of the moon, I hereby pronounce a judgment on you. The karma of my murder is the karma that you planted. You sent 3 groups of people here, and I want their lives. Therefore, it is only right that I take your life. Do you have any objections? Ndehu's pupils suddenly dilated, but before he could speak, Chu Yang had already slapped him to death in the name of the moon. Zhao Yunlong, the Coiling Dragon Martial Institution, was besieged by the Zhao clan and the Azure Dragon School. They had sought help from the 5 Elements sect, but there was no response. It was all because of you. The Zhao clan being massacred immediately changed into another version from Chu Yang's mouth. Everyone seemed to have come into contact with the inside story and the truth all of a sudden. Unfortunately, Chu Yang had no intention of explaining in detail. Pa. With a crisp sound, he once again used the name of the moon to slap Zhao Yunlong to death. A stubborn person. The moon is too lazy to listen to you. In the eyes of the moon, you are already a death sentence. After killing 2 people in a row, the Burning Sky Saint Sun and the Judgment Elder were next. According to the moon's rhythm, the 2 of them should also have the same ending. As expected, Burning Sky Saint Sun, Chu Yang began his judgment on the Burning Sky Saint Sun. Burning Sky Saint Sun, the Soul Devourer clan's moon is rather round. You have betrayed them and colluded with the Soul Devourer clan. Death penalty number 1. You have taken out of context and colluded with the Judgment Elder. You have wantonly trampled on the fairness, justice, and freedom of the 5 Elements sect. Death penalty number 2. Since you are a pig, using the moon's name to kill a pig like you will bring shame to the moon. In addition, a pig like you has a grudge with my brother Xiaofei. Your death sentence will be carried out by my brother Xiaofei. I sentence you to death with a reprieve. As he spoke, Chu Yang saw that the Burning Sky Saint Sun's 2 arms were intact. Brother Xiaofei was clearly at a disadvantage. He raised his hand and formed a blade with his true essence and directly cut off one of the Burning Sky Saint Sun's arms. This way, you won't be able to mock my brother Xiaofei. Although you are a pig and haven't even eaten the soil of the East Continent, you can still mock me. But now, you can't. You are also missing a pig trotter. Finally, it was the Judgment Elder's turn. Everyone held their breath. Judgment Elder, you only have 1 crime. Your table manners are too ugly. Chu Yang was too lazy to list out the Judgment Elder's crimes. With such an outrageous reason of your table manners are too ugly, he was about to slap the Judgment Elder to death. But at this time, Chu Yang's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He suddenly realized that someone was fighting with him for control of the judgment array. Why aren't you stopping? Buzz, buzz, buzz. The light barrier formed by the judgment array shook. A deep and furious voice transmitted into Chu Yang's heart. Which old thing? Right now, he didn't trust anyone in the Five Elements sect. The person who jumped out must have astonishing strength and was definitely unfavorable to him. Chapter 565. Whoosh. As soon as the voice entered Chu Yang's heart, it rumbled in his heart. The sound of something breaking through the air could be heard. A hunchbacked old man appeared out of thin air and inserted himself between Chu Yang and the judging elder. The old man's eyebrows were white, but his eyes were shining brightly at this moment. His eyes were filled with anger as he stared fiercely at Chu Yang. It was as if a fierce tiger was staring at its prey. This old man was obviously not affected by the Great Adjudication formation because he had control over the other half of the formation. Judging elder. When the judging elder saw the hunchbacked old man, his face immediately lit up with joy. He immediately said, "Elder, this man is unforgivable. He has committed a heinous crime and refused to be judged. Now, he is rebelling against his superiors and causing chaos in the Five Elements sect. Elder, please kill him immediately and clean up the mess." Judging elder. Everyone looked at the hunchbacked old man in astonishment. The so-called judging elder was elusive. Most of the people in the Five Elements sect did not recognize this so-called judging elder. At this moment, when the judgment elder appeared, everyone was extremely surprised. Their gazes all landed on the hunchbacked old man. Judging elder. Chu Yang squinted his eyes and his heart shook violently. Such a big shot had finally appeared. The restrictions of the Five Elements sect's power seemed a little complicated. Both the Supreme Elder and the Judging Elder had the power to restrict the sect leader of the Five Elements sect. However, the Judging Elder had the power to restrict the sect leader of the Five Elements sect. At the same time, not only did the Supreme Elder have the power to restrict the sect leader of the Five Elements sect, but he also had the power to restrict the Judging Elder. The sect leader of the Five Elements sect and the Judging Elder were the supervisors of each other, while the Supreme Elder was the judge of both sides. As for the person who restricted the Supreme Elder, it was the Golden Elder. This was the power structure of the highest level in the Five Elements sect. Logically speaking, it was impossible for the Judging Elder to be on the same side as the Five Elements sect. However, Chu Yang was two-faced. He had already determined that the Judging Elder would definitely stand on the side of the Judging Elder. "Hey, old man, it's one thing for you to appear so rashly, but shouldn't you introduce yourself first?" Chu Yang said carelessly, "If you don't tell me your name, how can I prostrate myself and worship you?" Chu Yang was the definition of lawless. The presiding elder had already called him the presiding elder, so why would he still need to introduce himself? This was a complete mockery. Also, did Chu Yang have the slightest intention of prostrating and worshipping him? Everyone was speechless for a moment, and they were full of admiration for Chu Yang. They had seen bold people, but they had never seen someone as bold as Chu Yang. The disciplinary elder was on equal footing with the sovereign, but Chu Yang actually dared to ridicule the disciplinary elder. Great! When the presiding elder heard that Chu Yang was mocking the judiciary elder, he was overjoyed. In his heart, he sneered, "How reckless. He even dares to mock the judiciary elder." The judiciary elder snorted, but it wasn't directed at Chu Yang, but at the presiding elder. With this snort, the presiding elder felt as if he was hit by a heavy hammer. He staggered backward and spat out a mouthful of blood. The joy on his face instantly turned into horror and fear. "Do I need you to teach me what to do?" The judiciary elder was very dignified. He didn't show any anger. "Elder, I know my mistake." The presiding elder quickly admitted his mistake. He was also a junior in front of the judiciary elder. This didn't mean that the judiciary elder had a good impression of Chu Yang. It was possible that the judiciary elder was doing this for the Five Elements sect disciples to see. Anyway, that was what Chu Yang thought. "You're so capable. You even dare to touch the judiciary grand array." As expected, Chu Yang was rebuked. While Chu Yang and the judiciary elder were arguing, they were secretly fighting for the right to control the judiciary grand array. The result was already decided. Because Chu Yang had the right to control part of the sect guarding grand array, the judiciary elder couldn't do anything to Chu Yang for the time being. Isn't this all thanks to you? You've managed the judgment hall so well. I admire and respect you to the extreme. Judgment elder, please accept my kneel. Of course, Chu Yang didn't kneel. The judiciary elder couldn't help but squint his eyes. He couldn't help but size up Chu Yang. He thought to himself, this brat is so daring. He knows that I'm the judiciary elder. Not only did he mock me, he even dared to laugh. He doesn't take me seriously at all. Chapter 566. The Saint page was the core of the entire array, and it wasn't under anyone's control. The fact that Chu Yang was able to obtain the approval of the 5-colored Saint page shocked the judiciary elder. Because of the Saint page, he judged that Chu Yang wasn't a troublemaker of the 5 Elements sect. However, since Chu Yang was so arrogant, no matter how he looked at it, he still needed to teach him a lesson. Where's the promised knee? The moment the judiciary elder opened his mouth, the situation suddenly changed, causing everyone's eyes to drop to the ground. The judiciary elder had also instantly fallen into despair. It was obvious that the judiciary elder was standing on Chu Yang's side. Hee. Chu Yang laughed. It seemed that the judiciary elder was standing on his side, but he didn't believe it easily. The older the ginger, the spicier it is. Who knows what kind of trick this old thing is playing? Later, when he shed tears of gratitude, he would be played like a monkey. At that time, he wouldn't even know where to cry. Sui Yunfu, Long Face, and the others didn't appear when Chu Yang was in danger. Right now, he was filled with malicious thoughts towards the entire 5 Elements sect. In his eyes, anyone could be someone who wanted his life. The judiciary elder in front of him was no exception. He definitely wouldn't let anyone control his life. Old mister, the delivery of my knee is a little slow. Please wait patiently. It will be delivered in a few days. If you have any questions, please send a letter to the sect master. I won't explain any further. Chu Yang was truly speaking nonsense in front of the judiciary elder, treating his knee as a delivery. The judiciary elder's eyes swept across the unconscious little guy in Chu Yang's embrace, and his pupils instantly shrank. A burst of anger erupted from him, and his deep voice instantly became incomparably cold. It was as if it came from the depths of hell, causing everyone to feel as if they were in the depths of hell. I have an urgent need for your knee. I hope that you can deliver it immediately. Otherwise, I will be very unhappy. Do you understand what I mean? At this moment, Chu Yang's heart trembled. The hunchbacked old man in front of him was unfathomable. At the very least, his cultivation was at the spirit realm. Please forgive me, old sir. The whole process is very complicated in terms of quality, appearance, packaging, and so on. In addition, there is a distance to send, so it will take some time. Please wait patiently, old sir. After that, Chu Yang continued, I am very happy to serve you, sir. Please comment on my service. If you are satisfied, please reply A. If not, please reply B. Chu Yang's appearance as a customer service worker stunned everyone. You can play like this. With such an open mind, everyone finally understood Chu Yang's eccentricity. The adjudicating elder was different. He could hear too much distrust from Chu Yang's words. He could clearly sense that Chu Yang was constantly on guard and even had the urge to run away at any time. What is it that made the young genius acknowledged by the Saint page so distrustful of his own sect? The adjudicating elder was shocked. He had been in seclusion all this time and did not know what had happened in the 5 Elements sect recently. What if I'm still not satisfied? You can complain. To whom? To the heavens and earth. Chu Yang replied with a grin, causing the adjudicating elder to narrow his eyes. At the same time, Chu Yang's action of wanting to run away became even more obvious. This made everyone feel that he was uneasy when facing the adjudicating elder. You mean to say that only the heavens and earth can control you? Me. Chapter 567. Old Mister, I won't cry until I see the coffin. If you have the ability, you can show it to me. Just a second ago, Chu Yang was speaking with a stiff neck, but suddenly, he wanted to escape. He wanted to make a whoosh sound, but the judiciary elder's body didn't leave his original position. Instead, he moved slightly. In an instant, Chu Yang felt as if he was surrounded by walls. Once he made a whoosh sound, he would be bounced back. What a terrifying old man. Even though I have half of the control of the judiciary formation, I am not enough for him. Chu Yang shuddered with fear and trepidation. Then, he caught everyone off guard and directly knelt down with a thud. The onlookers were stunned. Chu Yang was really ruthless. Didn't you say that you would only be here in 2 days? The judiciary elder narrowed his eyes and said, Old Mister, you are elegant and wise. After I heard about you, I really admire you. Hence, I can travel thousands of miles in the blink of an eye. Was Chu Yang really good at lying? Then, did you see the coffin? I saw it. Are you saying that this old man is about to die? Old Mister, you have great abilities and boundless magic power. Your lifespan is as long as the heavens. The judiciary elder's eyes were cold. He pointed at Zhao Yunlong and Endahu's corpses and said, Tell me, what did you do just now? Chu Yang's reply was very straightforward, I just didn't want to die. Are you sure you didn't do anything wrong? I don't know. Chu Yang said, I didn't let down the heavens and earth. I'm not afraid of ghosts knocking on my door in the middle of the night. Okay, I will believe you for now. He believed him just like that. That was too casual and careless. The onlookers were stunned again. This old man and young man were really amazing. The adjudicating elder had already pointed at little Guari, who was in a coma due to the serious injuries in Chu Yang's arms. He said in a cold voice, Tell me, who injured it? Little Guari? Lil Guari's identity was probably extraordinary. Chu Yang immediately realized this problem. He was thinking so much that Xiao Guari was almost slapped to death. His voice couldn't help but turn cold. He pointed at the presiding elder and said, Old Mister, then you'll have to ask the presiding elder of the Five Elements sect. I think his explanation will be much more interesting than mine. Oh. The sentencing elder seemed to have subconsciously responded. Immediately after, without any warning, he suddenly attacked. With a pa sound, the sentencing elder was directly sent flying. Elder. The presiding elder was so terrified that he knelt on the ground. The adjudicating elder didn't even look at him. He raised his hand and tapped out with a finger. Instantly, a burst of dense vitality entered Xiao Guari's body. Immediately, Chu Yang clearly sensed that the injuries in little Guari's body were healing at a visible speed. Little Guari woke up after a while. At this moment, Chu Yang finally let down his guard against the judiciary elder. Many thanks, judiciary elder. The adjudicating elder snorted coldly and said, Now you finally know that I'm the adjudicating elder. I don't need to introduce myself. Chu Yang smiled and said, I just want to know what it means to have a thunderous reputation. You're the most suitable one. Yaa. Xiao Guari's voice interrupted the two. He followed Chu Yang and knelt on the ground, kowtowing to the adjudicating elder to express his gratitude. Xiao Guari looked sincere, honest, and very cute. The adjudicating elder couldn't help but laugh. Little guy. The adjudicating elder smiled and said, Come to Grandpa. Let Grandpa see if your injuries are completely healed. Yaa. Xiao Guari was very respectful. The adjudicating elder hugged Xiao Guari and stroked its silk-like five-colored hair. He closed his eyes and carefully sensed it. After a while, he opened his eyes and looked at Chu Yang. You did well. Earth fire, wind drill, 5 elements thunderous hand, and the others are all very powerful. However, there's still a lot of room for improvement. The same goes for the 5 elements. However, your name is a little too lame. Chu Yang's face turned red. Then, he was horrified. This is simply an old monster. He can even see and know this. You're too ridiculous. The 5 elements chaotic steps derived from the 5 elements circulation steps is the best. With this step, This little guy will have a way to deal with danger when he cultivates it to the extreme. Chapter 568. Now you know how to be afraid. Chu Yang immediately started to flatter and flatter the adjudicating elder. However, it was useless. He was grabbed by the adjudicating elder and kneaded into a ball. Kid, didn't you want to run away since just now? If you don't run away now, I won't be able to let you go. Damn, what is this old monster trying to do? When Chu Yang was grabbed by the adjudicating elder, he had a feeling that he was going to fly away. He started to flatter the adjudicating elder again. Please don't joke around. The Five Elements sect is not a sheep pen, and I am not Grey Wolf. Let's talk nicely. Don't call me Grey Wolf. Besides, even if I am Grey Wolf, I am a successful Grey Wolf. The sheep in the Five Elements sect are all meat in my pot. Grey Wolf. The adjudicating elder laughed. He naturally didn't understand Chu Yang's joke at all. However, he felt that Chu Yang's description was accurate. The Five Elements sect was really a flock of sheep to Chu Yang. Even the adjudicating elder was going to be killed by him. How could there be such an arrogant and demonic disciple? We can't let this kid cause trouble in the sect anymore. Anyone with a discerning eye knew that Chu Yang was being targeted in the Five Elements sect. How could the adjudicating elder not see it? He originally planned to let Chu Yang go outside to lie low until the wind blew over. Now, he found another reason to do so. Grey Wolf, don't be too discouraged. You have to be strong. I have faith in you. Chu Yang was speechless. Grey Wolf was the strongest. Do I need you to tell me that? Go away. After the adjudicating elder said something that didn't match his status, Chu Yang was thrown out like a small stone. At the same time, Xiao Guori was also sent out. I will definitely come back. Chu Yang could only let out the sound of Grey Wolf being sent flying. He completely turned into a black dot in the distance and then disappeared without a trace. All of the Five Element sect's disciples who were present were stunned, and a large number of them burst into laughter. Such an inconceivable result. This meant that Chu Yang had killed Ndehu and Zhao Yunlong, cut off one of the Burning Sky Saint Child's arms, and crippled the Judgment Elder's soul reincarnation realm cultivation. Chu Yang would not be pursued, and he would not be held responsible. As a result, Chu Yang would not be held accountable. This meant that the Elder of Judgment and the Holy Son of Burning Heaven would be out of luck. While everyone was waiting for the Judgment Elder to deal with the Judgment Elder and the Burning Heaven Holy Son, a furious roar shook the heavens and earth. Who wants to kill my brother? The sound of the sonic boom arrived first, followed by a violent wind. Then, an elegant young man with 6 fingers appeared in front of everyone like a bolt of lightning. Who else could it be but the Saint Child? In the Five Elements sect, apart from the musical sage, who would directly call Chu Yang their younger brother. However, when the zither-tuned Saint Child arrived and saw the 2 corpses, as well as the Burning Sky Saint Child who had lost an arm, as well as the dispirited elder of the Judgment Hall, she couldn't help but be stunned. Who wants to kill my brother? Another furious roar was heard, followed by a sonic boom. The Silver Wolf, Cao Ju, the violent Saint Child, and Jin Duo quickly arrived. After they arrived, they had the same reaction as the zither-tuned Saint Child, but their expressions were much more lively. The Silver Wolf's eyes widened. This senior brother of mine is really abnormal. Even this can't kill him. It seems that I will definitely have to live under his shadow in the future. I was worried for nothing. The corner of Cao Ju's mouth also twitched. He looked at the Burning Sky Saint Child and the Judgment Elder in disbelief and muttered, "Are these 2 trash?" The Burning Sky Saint Child was furious. Cao Ju's eyes widened. What about you? Junior brother Chu cut off one of your arms. Do you believe that I won't twist off your head and kick it like a ball? Chapter 569. Boom. Divine Command Peak Master Sui Yunfu, Sloppy King Long Phage, Du Guangbua, Cao Ju's father, and the others all arrived at the same time. Behind them, Song Yang, Lu Tianrue, and the others also arrived. In an instant, all 15 peak masters of the 5 outer peaks of the Five Elements sect appeared. Disciple greets the Judgment Elder. Disciple greets the Judgment Elder. Whether it was Sui Yunfu or Song Yangyang, they couldn't help but be stunned when they arrived. It was obvious that the result had surprised them. They immediately noticed the judiciary elder and hurriedly bowed to him. "Oh, you are all out of breath. Are you all here to laugh at the judgment hall? You all came at the right time." The judgment elder noticed that Sui Yunfu and the others' auras were fluctuating. Although they weren't out of breath, they had used up a lot of energy. "We dare not." Sui Yunfu and the others immediately explained, "Elder, the Emperor Island has appeared. We just came back from investigating." Emperor Island. The Judgment Elder was obviously shocked. It was obvious that this so-called Emperor Island was extraordinary. To talk about the Emperor Island, one had to talk about a person first. It was the former ruler of the Eastern Wilderness, the Great Emperor of the Eastern Wilderness. The Great Emperor of the Eastern Wilderness had ruled the Eastern Wilderness for 10,000 years. He was a supreme figure, and the Emperor Island was where the Great Emperor of the Eastern Wilderness died. Some people said that the Emperor Island was the tomb of the Great Emperor, while others said that the Eastern Wilderness suppressed some kind of unknown terror on the Emperor Island. There were many different theories, and these were the two most reliable theories. However, one thing was certain: the Emperor Island had the inheritance left behind by the Great Emperor of the Eastern Wilderness. The Five Elements sect cared more about the Emperor Island than anyone else because the Great Emperor of the Eastern Wilderness was the Grandmaster of the Five Elements sect. The inheritance left behind by the Emperor Island was closely related to the Five Elements sect. This time, the news of the Emperor Island's appearance alarmed the Grand Elder, Elder Gold, and the Five Elements sect's sect master. They immediately gathered all the forces of the Five Elements sect and headed to the Emperor Island. This was also the reason why Sui Yunfu and the others didn't appear when Chu Yang was being judged. Cao Ju, the Saint Child of Violence, the Saint Child of Music, and the Five Elements Divine Child naturally had to go as well. This was because entering the Emperor Island had a cultivation level restriction. They were the true main force. Every time the Emperor Island appeared, the situation would be different. Sometimes, there would be no restrictions and anyone could enter, but sometimes, the restrictions would be extremely strict. Every time the Emperor Island appeared, there would be a storm of blood. The Five Elements sect, the Soul Devourer clan, the Longhu sect, the Seven Stars sect, the Thousand Devil sect, and the Four Nations would all fight until rivers of blood flowed. Taking advantage of the situation, your methods are not bad. This was naturally a compliment. The adjudicating elder was naturally praising the person who had attacked Chu Yang. He was old and experienced, and had experienced all kinds of hardships. With one look, he could tell that the peak masters of the 15 peaks had a clear stance. If the moderator, Chu Yang, was present, it would not be easy to kill Chu Yang. No one dared to answer him. "Elder, I wonder where that vile creature is." The adjudicating elder glanced at Sui Yunfu. "I'll throw him away." "Throw it away." Sui Yunfu was stunned, and the other peak masters also looked at each other. "Elder, is this all the doing of that vile creature?" Sui Yunfu once again braced himself and asked. "What do you think?" The adjudicating elder's indifferent tone sized up Sui Yunfu, causing Sui Yunfu's nerves to suddenly tighten. "Elder, what's going on?" The adjudicating elder's aura was weak, and he had directly fallen from the soul reincarnation realm. The burning sky saint had one of his arms cut off, and someone had died on the spot. Sui Yunfu really did not know how Chu Yang had done it. "What exactly happened?" "You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask?" Sui Yunfu choked, but many of the Five Element sect's disciples present knew that the adjudicating elder was speaking the truth. He did not understand the specifics of what had happened at all, and he just threw Chu Yang out in an extremely casual and willful manner. Dang, 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 from the Five Elements Hall, streams of five-colored sound waves were transmitted, and soon after, the sound of a bell resounded throughout the entire Five Elements sect. All the Five Elements sect disciples present could not help but be shocked. This was the sound of the bell to gather all the peak masters and elders of the Five Elements sect for a meeting. The adjudicating elder laughed. "Is this bell very appropriate? I happen to have something to say." Swoosh. He took the lead and rushed to the Five Elements Hall. Then, Sui Yunfu and the others immediately rushed over, and the Five Elements sect disciples immediately began to discuss. Do you guys think that they are going to discuss how to deal with Chu Yang? Not necessarily. Maybe it's because of the Emperor Island. I think it's a combination of both. Neither of them is a small matter. Chapter 570. The Five Elements Palace was like a five-colored cloud floating in the air. Clouds and mist swirled around it, and five-colored rays of light bloomed from time to time. It was like a five-colored peacock spreading its tail, showing a magnificent picture, as if it was a wonderful scene between heaven and earth. The scene inside couldn't be seen clearly. Vaguely, it seemed to be a paradise on earth. Mortals couldn't reach it, and it was magnificent and sacred. It seemed that only immortals could see the paradise there. At this moment, in the Five Elements Palace, a middle-aged man in a cyan robe was sitting on the main seat. He was 9 feet tall, with a 2-foot-long beard. He had a leopard head and round eyes, but his lips were painted with rouge, and his skin was delicate. He looked dignified without being angry. His appearance was definitely not handsome, but he was definitely not ugly either. It was as if he had vividly portrayed a burly man with a hint of finesse in his rough appearance. This was Jun Tianqiu, the suzerain of the Five Elements sect. At this moment, he sat there like a tiger crouching and a dragon coiling. He didn't show any aura, but he was very intimidating. Opposite Jun Tianqiu was the sentencing elder. On his left were the 15 peak masters of the Five Elements sect, and on his right were the guardian elders of the guardian halls of the Five Elements sect. However, 2 people were missing. One was the guardian elder of the Fire Element Peak, who was cut in half by Chu Yang's saber, and the other was the sentencing elder of the sentencing hall. The highest elder and the gold elder didn't participate. They didn't involve themselves in the unusual affairs of the Five Elements sect. Everyone is here. Let's start. The Judgment Elder was the first to speak. Everyone present, a very disgraceful thing happened in the Judgment Hall today. I am not happy about it. Now, I will solemnly remind everyone every disciple of the Five Elements sect is a treasure of the Five Elements sect. You can't kill them as you please. I hope everyone present can understand what I mean. The sentencing elder gave everyone such a warning at the beginning, which almost made the atmosphere freeze. What did the sentencing elder mean? Was he warning everyone, including the suzerain? Sui Yunfu, Long Face, and Du Guangbo were very surprised. They didn't expect the sentencing elder to be so protective of Chu Yang. Elder, are you talking about Five Elements sect's disciple, Chu Yang? Amidst the silence, the peak master of Water Element Peak, Lu Tianrui, stepped forward and said, although Chu Yang is extremely talented and has amazing comprehension ability, he is arrogant and unruly. He considers everyone else beneath him, and he has a vicious heart. His attacks are often extremely ruthless. He pointed at the 2 empty seats on the elders' seats and said again, the Fire Element Peak's guardian elder was killed by this kid with a single slash. Today, the Judgment Elder was seriously injured and his cultivation was reversed. This kid's nature is really worrying. The adjudicating elder did not speak. He had already lowered his eyes. Lu Tianrui, watch your words. You have no right to judge Chu Yang's character. Are you criticizing the Supreme Elder and the Golden Elder for not being able to see through people? Lu Tianrui, if you have any doubts about the Grand Elder and Elder Gold, you can go and tell them. As soon as Sui Yunfu and the other 2 spoke, Lu Tianrui felt like he was beaten to death. He couldn't say anything and was so angry that he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. However, there was nothing he could do. Chu Yang was the Supreme Elder and the Golden Elder's disciple. He really couldn't bear to be accused of such a big crime. Enough. The suzerain of Five Elements sect, Jun Tianqiu's voice was thunderous. Although it was just a casual remark, his voice was extremely loud. The entire Five Elements hall was filled with his voice. He interrupted the infighting between the 2 sides and said, the matters of the younger generation should be dealt with by the younger generation themselves. This is a competition between the juniors. None of you should interfere in the future to avoid being laughed at. Chapter 571. Emperor Island was indeed a big deal. After Jun Tianqiu spoke, after a short silence, someone frowned and said, "I wonder if there are any restrictions on entering Emperor Island this time." According to our observation this time, the restriction has already appeared. I'm afraid that only cultivators below the soul reincarnation realm can enter Emperor Island. That's very likely. We should prepare well, Yi Futian said. Actually, we have an advantage. Cao Ju's father, Cao Rong, immediately attracted everyone's attention when he opened his mouth. He said, "Everyone, don't tell me you've forgotten about Chu Yang." Song Yangyang, Lu Tianrue, and the others' expressions suddenly changed. Chu Yang can't be described as a peerless monster. He's only at the 7th level of the Qi Soul Realm, but he can kill a 9th level ascending Soul Realm expert. If he enters Emperor Island, who can be his match? As soon as Cao Rong finished speaking, the place fell silent again. His point of view made Song Yangyang, Lu Tianrue, and the others' expressions turn even uglier. Once again, Chu Yang became the center of attention. He became an important and even indispensable figure. All right, Chu Yang will be one of the members going to Emperor Island this time. Jun Tianqiu intervened and made the decision again. There were many points of concern in the subsequent meetings. The Soul Devourer clan, the Longhu sect, the Seven Stars sect, the Four Nations, and the Thousand Devils sect were all analyzed and compared with the Five Elements sect to determine their strengths. There were also alliances between the major forces and so on. There were many things discussed, and many decisions and arrangements were made in the end. Chu Yang didn't know anything about this. He hadn't been thrown far away by the Judgment Elder. He was still in the Five Elements sect. However, he soon left the Five Elements sect. He ran all the way. After he was dozens of miles away from the Five Elements sect, he found a place to recuperate. Although he had a powerful self-healing ability, and all the injuries on his body had long been healed, he was very cautious. He didn't want to leave any hidden dangers behind. After carefully examining his body once, he finally settled down. At this time, the feeling of leaving the Five Elements sect surged in his heart. Chu Yang was a little absent-minded. He had only been in the Five Elements sect for 3 months at most, but these 3 short months felt incomparably long to him. Imperceptibly, he had changed tremendously. When he'd first entered the Five Elements sect, he'd been extremely wary of those in the 8th or 9th tier of the Qi Soul Realm, let alone those in the Ascending Soul Realm, let alone the Holy Sons. But now, those in the Qi Soul Realm were no longer within his consideration. Those in the 8th or 9th tier of the Ascending Soul Realm could be killed with a single slash. Now, he was standing directly opposite the Five Elements Divine Child and challenging him. 3 months ago, he would never have thought of this. I only have half a year's time, but I need to at least step into the first level of the Soul Wheel realm to have the confidence to defeat the Five Elements Godchild. Chu Yang immediately frowned. He was now only in the 7th tier of the Qi Soul realm. The 8th and 9th tier of the Qi Soul realm had 2 levels, the 9th tier of the Ascending Soul realm had 9 levels, and the first level of the Soul Wheel realm had a total of 12 minor levels. He only had half a year's time, which meant that he had to at least advance by 1 level in half a month. Such an advancement speed was simply unheard of. Third transformation of the Ascending Soul realm. Chu Yang's frown deepened. Third transformation of the Origin Martial realm, third transformation of the Qi Soul realm, and then the third transformation of the Ascending Soul realm. He naturally hoped to achieve it, but to achieve the third transformation of the Ascending Soul realm, the accumulation, resources, and time required were not the same concept. There will be a way when the time comes. I can't care so much. The most important thing now is to find the treasures of the light and darkness element and cultivate the light and darkness innate physiques. Chu Yang went through his mind. He needed treasures, so there weren't many places he could go. He could only go to places where resources were concentrated, such as the Wei nation's imperial city, the Wei capital, the Wei capital, the Wei capital, Shua. Chapter 572. After flying for half a day, Chu Yang did not know how far he had flown, but he felt that the mountains and the wilderness were gradually receding behind him. There were more and more people in front of him. Soon, villages and towns were spread out like stars in the sky. It was like a picture spread out in front of him. He did not want to be too ostentatious, so he directly flew over. He immediately landed in the middle of a mountain forest and then started to recover his mental strength. His flying speed was extremely fast, and his consumption of true essence was also extremely high. While flying, he used his true essence while using his martial spirit to absorb the essence of heaven and earth to replenish his true essence. Although the speed of replenishing true essence could keep up with the speed of consumption, constantly using his martial spirit would consume his mental strength. He was mentally tired. Chu Yang made hand seals and started to set up a formation. Many formation seals flew out with him as the center. They spread out in an orderly manner in the open space of the mountain forest and then formed a formation. It shone brightly and then disappeared. His figure also completely disappeared. This was only a small use of the formation. Chu Yang's true and false true essence naturally played an important role. True and false, it formed a visual deception. Lotus seal, spiritual pearl seal, lion seal, Aquarius seal. To recover his mental strength, he naturally chose these spiritual seals in the Mahamayuri scripture. Once the lotus seal was formed, a swaying green lotus appeared in Chu Yang's mental world. Its roots penetrated into the mud and absorbed the rich nutrients of the mud. It quickly grew and bloomed into a pure and holy white lotus. The mental fatigue was like darkness. The spiritual pearl seal was like a big sun. The sun rose from the east, causing the night to recede and the day to come. The fatigue was like antelopes. If there were too many antelopes, the grass would be destroyed and the ecology would be unbalanced. The lion seal was a group of lions coming to suppress the antelopes and restore the ecological balance. In just a moment, Chu Yang was full of energy. I need to find a means of transportation. Otherwise, if I meet an enemy on the way, I won't be able to fight with full health. If I lose and die because of this, it will be a joke. A ball of light appeared in Chu Yang's hand. Gold, silver, black, blue, multicolored. The colors were constantly changing. This was the origin of gold. After obtaining the star divine gold from the silver fox, the two merged and the origin of gold changed a lot. The change in color was only one of the changes. The golden immortal body had become more solid and tenacious. In fact, Chu Yang didn't have the time to carefully feel the various mysteries within. Now, he wanted to use the golden origin to create a flying boat and then set up a formation. With the crystal stone as the power source, it could be used as a means of transportation. However, he was afraid that it would consume a lot of spirit crystals. The Grand Elder has a method to cultivate the mind. Don't tell me that the Golden Elder's lineage doesn't. If not, how could the Golden Elder's bloodline contend against the Grand Elder's bloodline? This wasn't much of an inspiration. Chu Yang was just comparing the two to each other. He had a question in his mind, and then he began to research it. Naturally, this was not a waste of time. If he could obtain the Golden Elder's spiritual cultivation method, he would have an additional layer of spiritual accumulation. Once this accumulation reached a certain level, he would be able to naturally break through the barrier between heaven and man and become a level 4 array master. How does the Golden Elder's bloodline cultivate the mind power? The peacock bright monarch has 8 arms and can form many seals such as the lotus seal. The golden immortal body also has 8 arms and holds 8 weapons in each hand. Could it be that visualizing the 8 weapons is the Golden Elder's spiritual cultivation method? The golden origin was extremely shocking. It could actually manifest in the mind and transform into a golden celestial being and various weapons to injure the divine soul. Chu Yang had already understood this when he fought with the harp sound saint, but he didn't know the spiritual cultivation method to improve the mind power. Knife, spear, sword, halberd, wheel, Chu Yang's glabella was glistening yellow, which made him look very noble. However, he frowned. It's really useless. If the spiritual cultivation method is as simple as visualizing the weapons in the hands of the golden 8 arms, then the spiritual cultivation method is too weak. But what about the foundation? Does the Golden Elder's bloodline not have a spiritual cultivation method? Chapter 573. Devil Chi. Chu Yang was startled in his heart. He immediately withdrew from his practice, and sensed this fluctuation. According to the strength of the fluctuation and its approximate direction, he released his divine perception and quickly covered the area. Now, Chu Yang's divine perception was so powerful that it could detect extremely far away. Soon, a scene appeared in his mind. In the forest about 1,000 meters away from him, there were two fierce-looking middle-aged men chasing and intercepting three young men who were about 23 or 24 years old. Chu Yang felt the devil chi that Little Six mentioned from the two fierce-looking middle-aged men. Cold, evil, dark, devouring, bloody, and so on. There was only a gloomy aura and nothing else. How could this be? The so-called devil chi was somewhat different from what Chu Yang had imagined. The devils in Chu Yang's mind were not necessarily evil. There was no distinction between righteous and evil cultivation methods. There was only a distinction between good and evil in people's hearts. If one practiced righteous cultivation methods but did evil things, it was the devil path. If one practiced devil path cultivation methods but did righteous things, it was the righteous path. If one practiced devil path cultivation methods, it was not necessarily evil. It was like having a weapon in one's hand. It did not necessarily mean that one would kill people. It should be because the two people in front of me are not the devils in my imagination. They are the devils that I despise the most. That's why their devil chi is so unbearable. When Chu Yang thought of this, he could not help but laugh. In his imagination, there were so few devils who were not afraid of anything. How could he meet such people casually? Devils were not necessarily fierce, cruel, murderous, and irrational. They only knew how to kill and had no humanity. The demon in his heart could be wild and violent, but it was also the type that did not take orders from anyone. It only took orders from himself. It was lawless and disregarded all Taos, all laws, and all principles. It disregarded all shackles of the world. It was unrestrained and unrestrained. This was the devil in his mind. These thoughts surged in his mind. Chu Yang felt that the full martial spirit suddenly jumped, as if a fool had just woken up from a dream. He felt that the world had changed, but it was only for a moment. Chu Yang was bewildered. The full martial spirit's strange reaction shocked him, but he didn't know the reason. He faintly felt that the full martial spirit was related to the devil. He didn't have time to think too deeply about it. He could sense that the three youths were already very dangerous. The three of us are Jinyuan City's Sun Clan's disciples. If you want to attack us, you better think twice. Among the three young men, a handsome young man with fair skin bellowed furiously. As for the other two people, one was an extremely beautiful woman with a graceful figure, while the other was a burly young man with a simple and honest face. The three of them tried their best to deal with the attacks of the two middle-aged men. Trash of the Thousand Devil Sect, once my father finds out, he will definitely exterminate you two trash, the handsome young man said angrily. If the two of you leave, our Sun family will not seek revenge over such a small matter. However, if we die, my Sun family will definitely investigate this matter to the end. That graceful woman also angrily threatened. Only the honest young man didn't say a word. Jinyuan City was a city adjacent to the Wei capital of the Wei Kingdom. Chu Yang knew about it because Jin Duo had warned him in advance. He had specifically warned Chu Yang that he mustn't pit his own brothers against others. Jin Duo was from Jinyuan City's Marquis Mansion. He was Jin Depan, and he had a younger brother, Jin Duo. Thousand Devil Sect. Chu Yang was slightly surprised when he heard these three words. This was the first time he had met someone from the Thousand Devil Sect. So what if it's the Sun family? What can the Sun family do if we kill you? You actually used a mere Sun family to threaten us. It's simply ridiculous. The Sun family is just a small family in Jinyuan City. I think they are scared silly. Chapter 574. Originally, the three from the Sun family could barely hold on, but when the two middle-aged men from the Thousand Devil Sect stopped holding back, the three of them were in great danger. I should have listened to Shatu. The beautiful woman's face turned pale. If she had fallen into the hands of the Thousand Devil sect, she would have been severely humiliated before she was killed. At this moment, she was terrified and regretful. These three were all disciples of the Sun family in Jinyuan City. They were all in the 7th or 8th layer of the Chi Soul realm. The woman was called Sun Lele, the honest-looking man was called Sun Shusha, and the other was called Sun Yongan. When the three of them came out to train and passed by a place where the Thousand Devil sect's disciples might be hiding, Sun Shusha was very worried. Lele, let's be careful and take a detour. Otherwise, we'll be in danger if the demons of the Thousand Devil sect target us. You idiot, Sun Yongan, the other companion, said angrily. Take a detour? Are you kidding? We're here to train, so why should we be afraid of the Thousand Devil sect? Shatu, Yongan is right. We're here to train, so we can't be afraid of anything. Also, the detour is too far. Sun Lele was not afraid of the Thousand Devil sect and did not want to take a detour. Unfortunately, they only knew how powerful the Thousand Devil sect was now. Pu. Sun Lele's true essence transformed into ribbons and blocked the flying swords, but the impact still made her spit out a mouthful of blood. Lele. Sun Zisha was extremely anxious. He fiercely gritted his teeth, and his face suddenly flushed red. Then, his aura suddenly skyrocketed. With a rumble, true essence surged out, condensing into 9 large black stones that whistled towards the 2 middle-aged men. Hurry up and leave, all of you. Sun Tzu angrily roared again and again. It was as if one man could hold back 10,000 men. He suddenly rushed forward and blocked Sun Lele and Sun Yongan behind him. Shatu. Sun Lele's expression changed. She could see that Sun Shusha had used a forbidden technique. This was almost destroying his martial arts foundation. Even if he did not die, his future achievements would be limited. Go. Sun Shusha was crazy. Why aren't you leaving? Sun Yongan did not hesitate. He turned into a cloud of smoke and immediately fled. Sun Lele gritted her teeth and followed him. When the 2 middle-aged men saw this, they only sneered. It was truly delusional to think that they could escape so easily. However, when they were about to move, whoosh, whoosh, 2 flying daggers appeared out of thin air. They were as fast as lightning. They directly pierced through the middle of the 2 middle-aged men's eyebrows and pierced through their heads. How is this possible? How? The 2 middle-aged men's eyes were wide open before they died. The shock in their eyes froze, and they were filled with disbelief. Everyone in the Thousand Demon sect wanted to beat them up. They were extremely careful in their actions, and every time they fought, they would be extremely careful and vigilant of their surroundings. However, just now, they had sensed the slightest fluctuation of true essence. These 2 flying daggers were even stranger. Previously, they had not been able to see them at all. By the time they noticed them, it was already too late. Blood splattered everywhere, mixed with a hint of white. Bang bang. The 2 middle-aged men fell stiffly to the ground, no longer breathing. Kill, kill, kill. The simple and honest man's grandson seemed to have gone mad. He was still trying his best to control the 9 black stones, but he suddenly froze and looked at everything in front of him in astonishment. Why were the 2 devils of the Thousand Devil sect lying on the ground? They're dead. How did they die? This. Sun Zi was in disbelief. Sun Yongan, who was running away in a hurry, glanced behind him. Although he had already escaped far away, with his vision, he could still clearly see the situation there. The 2 devils of the Thousand Devil sect had fallen to the ground, dead. There was still blood flowing on the ground. Lele. Sun Yongan said. There's no need to run. The 2 bastards of the Thousand Devil sect are already dead. Sun Lele could not help but stop. He turned his head and was also stunned. There was only a lonely and simple figure left at the place where the battle had been. Let's go and take a look. Sun Lele followed cautiously. They quickly flew back to the place where the battle had been. They could not help but look at Sun Zi, who was standing there in a daze, with a puzzled expression. Sun Yongan directly asked, Stone, what's going on? Are you guys okay? Suddenly, the 3 of them seemed to hear a small beast asking if they were okay. They could not help but be shocked. Chapter 575. It was this little beast that spoke to them just now. Whoosh! The young man waved his hand, and 2 rays of light shot out. Then, he skillfully took the storage rings of the 2 people from the Thousand Devil sect. Thank you for saving our lives, Senior. The honest Sun Tzu knelt down heavily with a bang and kowtowed repeatedly to express his gratitude. Don't think too much. I'm just here to rob. If you want to kowtow, I won't stop you. Chu Yang couldn't help but look at this simple and honest man. He had a very good impression of this simple and honest guy. At the critical moment of life and death, he was willing to stand up and face death by himself while his companions ran for their lives. At least, Chu Yang couldn't hate such a person. However, there was nothing he could do about the illness left behind by the man's forbidden technique. This is a righteous person. What a pity. Chu Yang regretted watching from the side for so long. Xiao Guori had already urged him. However, he didn't expect the honest man to have such a trick up his sleeve. Thank you for saving our lives, brother. Sun Yonggan also expressed his gratitude. The 3 of us are disciples of the Sun family of Jinyuan City. This is Sun Tzu, and the one beside him is Sun Lele. I'm Sun Yonggan. May I know who you are? Shitu. Sun Lele pulled Sun Tzu up from the ground. She still had lingering fears after escaping death. At the same time, she looked at Chu Yang. She was curious and respectful of the young man in front of her. Chu Yang hesitated for a while and didn't reveal his identity as a disciple of the 5 Elements sect. My name is Chu Yang. I came out from the Coiling Dragon Town to see the world and coincidentally met the 3 of you in Jinyuan City. What kind of place is Coiling Dragon Town? Why haven't I heard of it before? Sun Yonggan was suspicious. He secretly sized up Chu Yang and was shocked. Chu Yang's aura was extremely restrained. He couldn't see through Chu Yang's cultivation. Brother Chu is also going to Jinyuan City. He didn't show it and said happily, the 3 of us are Jinyuan City's landlords. If Brother Chu doesn't mind, why don't we go together? At that time, the 3 of us can play host to you. Sun Zisha and the woman, Sun Lele, were also looking forward to it. Since he was unfamiliar with the place, it was good to have someone who was familiar with the situation. Chu Yang thought for a moment and agreed. Okay. Among the 3 of them, Sun Yonggan wanted to curry favor with Chu Yang and was extremely enthusiastic. Among the 3, Sun Yonggan was also the most talkative and adept at flattery. It was just that his flattery was too obvious, which made Chu Yang somewhat displeased. Sun Lele's appearance was not bad, and he was worthy of the word eye candy. Although Sun Zisha was not good with words, he was the only one among the 3 that Chu Yang was willing to make friends with. The 3 of them chatted and laughed as they traveled. When they talked about how Sun Zisha had used a taboo technique and destroyed his foundation, Sun Lele couldn't stop weeping. Sun Zi didn't seem to care at all. It's fine. It's good enough that you're still alive. It's just a single use of a forbidden technique. That's nothing. Damned Thousand Demon sect, Sun Yonggan said through gritted teeth. When I step into the ascending soul tier, I'll definitely teach them a lesson. Don't talk nonsense. Sun Zisha glanced at him. Sun Yonggan immediately looked up and sighed. Our Sun family is really too weak. Otherwise, how could it be like this? The 2 demons didn't have any scruples at all. As he spoke, he suddenly looked at Chu Yang eagerly. Brother Chu Yang, your strength is amazing. Killing those 2 demons of the Thousand Demon sect was like killing chickens. I'm sure Brother Chu has a lot of extraordinary cultivation techniques, some of which are nothing at all. Brother Chu, why don't you give us 1 or 2 cultivation techniques to increase our strength so that we won't be a burden to you? Just 1 or 2, I don't ask for much. Sun Yonggan stared at Chu Yang with anticipation in his eyes. Chu Yang frowned slightly and thought to himself, am I that close to you? 1 or 2 cultivation techniques? Sun Yong'an's flattery made Chu Yang feel inferior. He was shameless, but now he also admitted defeat. You see, I seem to have a lot of cultivation techniques. Chu Yang spread out his hands and smiled bitterly. Brother Sun, don't misunderstand. I just came from a small place, not some rich family. Sun Yongan smiled embarrassedly, but he was already cursing in his heart. You're really stingy. Last time, I flattered the young Marquis of the Rongwa Marquis Mansion, and he casually gave me a true origin skill. I flattered this Chu Yang for so long, but there was no benefit at all. Seeing how powerful he is and that he even has a spirit beast, I thought he was amazing. It seems that he's just SOSO. He cursed in his heart for a while, but he still couldn't take it. In his heart, he belittled Chu Yang again. This Chu Yang, it seems that he's just a country bumpkin from some corner of the world. Chu Yang was too lazy to pay attention to Sun Yongan. Brother Chu. Sun Zisha felt Chu Yang's displeasure, but he didn't dare to say anything. He only pointed ahead and said, Brother Chu, look, that's Jinyuan City. Jinyuan City. Chu Yang looked over, and saw a huge city on the endless land in front of him. It seemed as if a sun had risen from the horizon. He could faintly feel the oppressive feeling coming from that huge city even though he was dozens of miles away from it at this moment. Jinyuan City is so extraordinary. Chu Yang's eyes suddenly lit up with joy. It shouldn't be hard to find a light and darkness attribute treasure in such a city. Chapter 576. The distant Jinyuan City was like a towering giant. It also seemed like an ancient city that had existed since ancient times. The closer he got to the city, the more he could feel it. When he was only a few dozen li away from the city, Chu Yang could clearly feel the surging heaven and earth yuan qi gathering in the city, forming a huge pressure and deterrent force. The pressure that Chu Yang felt earlier was because of this. The entire Jinyuan City is a great array. It should be at least a grade 5 array. Chu Yang thought to himself. Brother Chu, you have to be careful. Flying in the sky above Jinyuan City is absolutely forbidden. If you dare to fly over Jinyuan City, you have to be careful. Sun Yongan pretended to be kind and reminded Chu Yang. However, there was a mischievous look on his face. He really thought that Chu Yang was a country bumpkin. Ever since Sun Yongan failed to ask Chu Yang for the cultivation technique, not only did he lose his enthusiasm, but his tone also became weird. He kept insinuating Chu Yang. Chu Yang pretended that he didn't hear him and increased his speed. Soon, the city gate of Jinyuan City appeared in front of Chu Yang. It was like the mouth of a giant beast. This was the east gate of Jinyuan City. It was 100 zhong wide and 50 zhong tall. One could imagine how majestic the walls of Jinyuan City were. Soon, the three Sun brothers and Chu Yang entered Jinyuan City. After returning to Jinyuan City, Sun Lele was like a fish back in water. He introduced everything about Jinyuan City to Chu Yang. Jinyuan City is 1,321 li long and 910 li wide. It is divided into the east, south, north, and west city. There are two Marquis mansions, the Marquis of Rong Nation and the Marquis of Rich Nation. There are also 9 great clans. Chu Yang listened carefully. The Marquis of Rong Nation and the Marquis of Rich Nation were located in the north and south city respectively. They were the two giants of Jinyuan City. They were also the supreme existences. These two areas were also the safest places in Jinyuan City. Many rogue cultivators gathered there, and there were even some old fellows living in seclusion there, living a peaceful life. At the same time, these two places were also places that some big merchants liked to live in. Not only was it safe, but it was also a symbol of status that was close to the two marquises' manners. Those who couldn't live in these two places were considered inferior. Wealthy Marquis Mansion. As Chu Yang listened to Sun Lele's chatter, he had a general understanding of the rich country Marquis Mansion. The rich country Marquis Mansion was terrifyingly powerful. Looks like Fan Jinduoduo's identity is extraordinary. Chu Yang could not help but laugh in his heart. When he was in the 5-element sect, he did not notice it. Brother Chu, don't think that the northern and southern districts are the most intimidating. In fact, the western district of Jinyuan City is the most bustling and prosperous district. Especially the Treasure Exchange Square in the western district. Why don't we go and take a look? Sun Yongan became enthusiastic again, but his expression was a little cynical. It seemed like he wanted to bring Chu Yang, this country bumpkin, to see the world and broaden his horizons. That's right. There are thousands of martial artists setting up stalls in the Treasure Exchange Square. Sun Lele immediately introduced the Treasure Exchange Square again. The Treasure Exchange Square was a place specially for martial artists to exchange their treasures. Chu Yang frowned. He could not tolerate Sun Yong'an's behavior. However, after glancing at Sun Yong'an, he did not flare up. Although Jinyuan City was very big, the four of them moved very quickly. After about the time it took for an incense stick to burn, a huge square appeared in front of them. The square was densely packed with stalls set up by martial artists. Beside the stalls, there were signs stating the treasures that the stall owners wanted to exchange for. So many. Chu Yang was slightly shocked and exclaimed in surprise. With a glance, he could not see the end of the crowd at all. There were all kinds of treasures in the Treasure Exchange Square. There were even some strange treasures. The advantage of trading here was that it was relatively cheaper. The disadvantage was that it was not safe enough, because it was in the western part of the city, and the Treasure Exchange Square did not forbid killing. It was entirely possible for people to kill others and steal their treasures. Of course, it was also relatively rare. Normally, those who dared to take out precious treasures were those who were strong enough to intimidate others. Although the Treasure Exchange Square does not forbid killing, it is impossible to judge a person's strength from their appearance. Even if someone took out some precious treasures, who knows how strong that person is? Maybe he is just a Soul Wheel Realm martial artist who is playing around. Sun Lele said. Chu Yang nodded. Little An. Suddenly, a voice sounded. Sun Yong'an turned his head and was immediately overjoyed. Third uncle. A one-eyed middle-aged man was walking towards them with a smile on his face. Sun Lele and Sun Shusha turned their heads and immediately recognized the person. They were very happy. Third uncle. Haha, the three of you have been training outside for so long. You are finally willing to come back. The one-eyed middle-aged man had already noticed Chu Yang. He smiled and said, "Who is this?" Sun Yong'an glanced at Chu Yang and immediately curled his lips, but he did not say anything. In the beginning, he was still flattering Chu Yang. However, after interacting with him, he was very sure that Chu Yang did not have any background. Especially after returning to Jinyuan City, he did not take Chu Yang seriously at all. Chapter 577. Third uncle, this is Chu Yang. Sun Lele said in a crisp voice, "The three of us owe him our lives." Oh! The one-eyed middle-aged man was surprised and shocked. He immediately said, "Little brother, you are really grateful. Why don't you come with us? I can also entertain you to thank you for your help this time." No need. Chu Yang shook his head. Sun Lele and Sun Zisha looked at Chu Yang and wanted to persuade him. Let's say goodbye here. Chu Yang really didn't like Sun Yong'an. He might explode later. Although he also wanted to walk around the Treasure Exchange Square, he didn't want to be with Sun Yong'an. He clasped his fist and said goodbye. This gathering is fate. We will meet again in the future. Okay. Sun Zisha nodded. Sun Yong'an's mouth curled up. He only smiled at Chu Yang but didn't say much. His smile was obviously perfunctory. Chu Yang didn't care. He left directly and soon arrived at the rich country marquis mansion. What a mansion! What a gorgeous mansion! What a domineering mansion! Chu Yang looked at the mansion in the distance and felt that the mansion was very unique. It was a huge gold ingot, but the whole body was silver. When he looked closer, he felt that the whole mansion was made of silver. The details of the building were definitely not exquisite. The entire building was rough and huge, vividly displaying the grandeur, heroism, and nouveau riche. The two stone lions in front of the door were vivid and lifelike, looking disdainfully at the surroundings with a hint of mockery. There were rows of armored soldiers in front of the door. They were very serious. Their aura was dense and evil. They were like killing gods. Obviously, they were an iron-blooded army. With an iron-blooded army as guards, Chu Yang could only say that it was domineering. With such an army present, The pedestrians on the surrounding streets unconsciously distanced themselves from this mansion, and didn't dare to approach it. This made Chu Yang appear extremely lonely and conspicuous. "Who are you?" One of the guards at the entrance of the Marquis mansion immediately shouted. Chu Yang understood that once someone came within 10 jong of the mansion, the Marquis mansion would be able to kill them directly. "This majestic general, I am Chu Yang. I am here to see Second Fatty Jin. Please go in and report." Chu Yang cupped his fists. His tone was originally very polite, but the 3 words Fatty Jin erased everything, making him seem frivolous and arrogant. However, Jin Duoduo emphasized that he had to be called Fatty Jin. "What?" When the surrounding soldiers heard Chu Yang's name, they were all shocked. They all took a step back and stared at Chu Yang with all their might. It was as if they wanted to see who he was, and also as if they wanted to imprint him in their minds, afraid that they would forget him. "What are you looking at? Hurry up and kneel." The leader of the armored soldiers roared in a panic. Then, his armor clanged incessantly. Then, the 2 rows of armored soldiers uniformly knelt down in front of Chu Yang. "Greetings to the heaven-gifted martial prodigy Chu Yang. Greetings to the invincible, omnipotent, extraordinarily handsome, extraordinarily magical, and boundless magical power Chu Yang." The nearby pedestrians saw this scene and were all shocked. They couldn't help but stop and stare at Chu Yang with their eyes wide open. Chu Yang's expression slightly froze. He was already so famous and powerful, how could he not know? "Heroes, please rise, rise. I'm a coward, don't scare me." The soldiers immediately looked at Chu Yang in unison. It seemed that the rumors were true. This Chu Yang seemed to be a master who would not even pay for his own life. No wonder the second young master had specifically warned them to be extremely careful when they saw this swindler. At this time, an armored soldier rushed into the mansion in a hurry to make a report. Ha ha ha, not long after, a hearty laugh immediately sounded. With a shio sound, Chu Yang felt as if a huge boulder was rolling down from the top of a mountain, crushing down on him. Big, round, fat. It was definitely a huge meatball. Second Fatty Jin was so fat that it surpassed the sky. He was even fatter than Jin Duoduo. He was wearing gold and silver, just like a golden ball. Chapter 578. Chu Yang was speechless. How could he change his attitude so quickly? "Evildor, I gave you face and asked you to show your true form, but you actually dared to hesitate. Eat my fist." Boom. Second Fatty Jin leaped up from the ground like a ball. He jumped down from the sky and fiercely threw a punch at Chu Yang. The fat on his body was like a mountain range, gathering in one place. It was as if the fat on his body was pulled out from his body and he suddenly became like Jin Duoduo, a burly man. His fist turned into a meatball and smashed down like a huge rock. This was a test of his true form. Boom. Chu Yang's body also exploded with a powerful aura. He threw a punch and the air above his arm formed the image of an undulating mountain range. Boom. The two collided like 2 mountains crashing into each other. A deafening sound like the mountains collapsing and the earth cracking could be heard. A strong wind blew and a dazzling light completely covered the area. "Ha, it is indeed the great Evildor Chu, the great Chu." Amidst the loud laughter, a burly man was sent flying from the light with a punch. He landed on the ground and staggered back more than 10 meters before he could stop himself. Hiss. When the light dissipated and the soldiers saw the scene in front of them, they could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Chu Yang did not move at all. The ground where he stood was not damaged at all. It must be known that in front of such a huge force, the ground was like a piece of tofu. However, in the face of such a huge force, the tofu was completely unharmed. On the other hand, every step Second Fatty Jin took back created a huge hole in the ground. It was as if a spider web had been torn open. Such amazing control. It would be fine if he did not move at all after such a collision, but the ground under his feet is completely undamaged. The soldiers were extremely shocked. This kind of strength was too shocking. As for Second Fatty Jin's strength, they naturally knew that there were very few people in Jinyuan City who could compare to him. However, This Chu Yang in front of them was even more ridiculous. This kneel is really not undeserved. If I accidentally offended such a person, I reckon I'll have to bear the consequences. Haha. Second Fatty Jin returned to his meatball form. Clearly, he liked this form. Great Evildor Chu, I'm evil enough, right? Second Fatty Jin was extremely proud of himself. He was naturally sure that it was Chu Yang without a doubt. Not many people knew the 100,000 mountain of flesh technique. Chu Yang smiled and then commented, "When you were young, you must have been cheated and had a shadow in your heart. May I ask how big the shadow is?" Bullshit. Bullshit. You're the one who's been tricked into having a shadow in your heart. Second Fatty Jin bounced up like a ball. Monster Chu, I'm warning you. If you slander me again, I'll cancel tonight's Happy Pavilion event. Cancel it immediately. Don't even think about having 1,000 times tonight. My apologies. Chu Yang laughed. Recently, I don't like beauties but treasures. Where can I find glowing treasures or pitch-black treasures? Bah. Second Fatty Jin said angrily, "If you don't want a beauty, then I'll give you one." He turned his head and ordered, "Men, go to the Happy Pavilion." An extremely luxurious carriage rushed over and stopped in front of the mansion. A group of orioles and swallows immediately appeared, each more beautiful than a flower. Without any explanation, Chu Yang was pulled into the carriage and left with a rumbling sound. Chapter 579. Are you usually so immoral? Chu Yang felt indignant. He didn't have anyone by his side. Second Fatty Jin grinned and said, "You're envious. That's exactly what I want." Along the way, Second Fatty Jin and Chu Yang became more familiar with each other. Their conversation was originally very casual, but now it was even more casual. As for the Merry House, it was the best place to enjoy in Jinyuan City. It was also located in the west side of the city. The Merry House covered an area of 100 miles. It was a mountain in the city. The entire mountain was hollow, and there were countless treasures inside. They sold spirit beasts, slaves, and all kinds of gambling battles. In short, the Merry House had everything you could think of. Not only was it a gentle place, but it was also a place to squander money. Behind the Merry House was the Wei Kingdom's imperial family. There was a Merry House in every county's capital, and it made a lot of money for the Wei Kingdom. Of course, Jinyuan City's Merry House was also a supporter of the Marquis household. To be more precise, the Merry House was built by Second Fatty Jin's ancestors. However, it was now taken over by the Wei Kingdom's royal family. "Young master. We're here." A voice came from outside, and the carriage stopped quickly. The 13 beauties in the carriage didn't get off. Instead, the carriage rumbled away. Second Fatty Jin and Chu Yang got off the carriage. They were very proud. They pointed at the incomparably huge building in front of them and said, "Monster Chu, this is the Merry House." Chu Yang swept a glance at this place, and his pupils involuntarily shrank. He immediately sensed the Great Formation here. The Great Formation here was actually connected to the Great Formation of the entire Jinyuan City. Because of the existence of this Great Formation, the heaven and earth energy in this place was incomparably rich. "Young Marquis, please, please." Instantly, a tall and sturdy man ran over. His surging aura shocked Chu Yang. Although the man in front of him was restraining his aura, Chu Yang could instantly confirm that he was in the 9th layer of the Ascending Soul Realm. A 9th layer Ascending Soul Realm cultivator as a receptionist. En. Second Fatty Jin nodded casually. "This is..." The man looked at Chu Yang. "This is my good friend Chu Yang. If you see him in the future, you better be more polite." "Don't say I didn't warn you," Second Fatty Jin said directly. The big man hurriedly nodded and smiled. "Young Master Chu Yang, please forgive me in the future." He was extremely polite. Then, he led the way in front. Chu Yang swept his gaze around and discovered that there were many people enjoying themselves in the Merry House. However, most of them were not welcomed by attendants. Even if there were occasionally attendants, their cultivation bases were at most in the Chi Soul Realm. Only Second Fatty Jin had a 9th level Ascending Soul Realm warrior come out to greet him. Chu Yang followed Second Fatty Jin inside. Walking along the wide and beautiful corridor, it didn't take long for them to enter a magnificent hall. On the left side of the hall stood a row of beautiful women, either humans or demons, while on the right side stood attendants. "Welcome, young Marquis, young Master Chu." All of them bowed respectfully, their sleeves drooping to the ground. "Wow, it's not the slightest bit inferior to the women in my previous life," Chu Yang exclaimed. There were already many guests sitting in the hall. Among them, there were 4 people that Chu Yang was familiar with. Sun Yonggan, Sun Zisha, and Sun Lei were also brought to the merry house by their uncle. "The 3 of you went out to train and survived. Today, I'm bringing you to the merry house to relax." Sun Lei's face was already red. The one-eyed man naturally saw it. "Lei, don't think that this is just a place to enjoy yourself. Today, I've paid a great price to bring you here. My goal is to let you see and make friends with some important people." Third uncle, "Don't worry." Sun Yonggan was the most excited and also the most adapted. He was already prepared to curry favor with some important people. In addition, there was no need to mention the delicious food. There were also some beautiful demons dancing in the hall. There were even heavenly beauties playing the zither. Where else could they find such a place? Chapter 580. At the entrance of the hall, there was a row of beauties and the same number of attendants. They were neatly divided into 2 rows, waiting for something. "An important person has arrived," the one-eyed middle-aged man said. "I'm afraid this person's identity is extraordinary." Sun Zisha echoed. "He must be extremely powerful. It's too grand." Sun Lei exclaimed. When they came in, no one came to welcome them. They were even afraid that they were here to cause trouble, so they were strictly checked. "Wow, what kind of important person are we going to welcome?" Sun Yong'an's eyes lit up. If he could curry favor with such an important person, wouldn't he soar to the sky? Suddenly, "Welcome, young Marquis, young Master Ji." A voice echoed in the hall. "Young Marquis?" The one-eyed middle-aged man's third uncle whispered, "This young Marquis is either the young Marquis of Rong Nation or the young Marquis of Fu Nation. There's nothing to be suspicious about. But who is this young Master Chu? I have to take a good look at this young Master Chu." Sun Yonggan opened his eyes wide and looked carefully. Many people in the hall were looking at the entrance of the corridor in the distance. They saw a young man who was as fat as a meatball walk in. Beside him was a slender young man with a small beast standing on his shoulder. Chu Yang, Sun Yonggan, Sun Lei, and Sun Zisha were all shocked. Wasn't the so-called young Master Chu the same Chu Yang who had saved them before? Wasn't the little beast on his shoulder the same one who had asked them if they were injured? For a moment, Sun Yonggan and the others felt extremely complicated. Young Master Chu Yang is actually so powerful, Sun Lei whispered to herself, almost sleep-talking. To be honest, she was grateful to Chu Yang before, but she didn't pay much attention to him. It's not surprising. Sun Zisha was the most indifferent, but he was also very shocked. Chu Yang was too low-key. Sun Yong'an's face was so gloomy that it could drip water. Previously, when they had traveled together with Chu Yang to Jinyuan City, Sun Yong'an had come to the conclusion that Chu Yang was just SOSO. That was why he had stopped flattering Chu Yang. He didn't even bother to put on a disguise. Naturally, he understood that Chu Yang must have seen the disdain he showed. He must be very disgusted with him. Previously, when Chu Yang hated him, he didn't care. But now, not to mention regret, he had missed the opportunity to befriend such a noble person like Chu Yang. It would be difficult for him to restore his relationship with Chu Yang. If Chu Yang wanted to make things difficult for him, he would probably beg for death. A dignified young master who can be on par with the young marquis of the wealthy country actually lied and said that he was a country bumpkin. He even pretended to be so good. Are you very proud of yourself? Sun Yong'an's heart was filled with hatred. He gritted his teeth and said, I'll let you be arrogant for now. If I meet a noble, I'll definitely teach you a lesson. Suddenly, he was frightened. He remembered that he had kindly reminded Chu Yang that he couldn't fly in the sky above Jinyuan City. He also remembered that he had dragged Chu Yang to the treasure trading square to see the world. While the three of them were feeling very complicated, their third uncle, who was beside them, spoke. "This is the Chu Yang that we met at the treasure trading square. He is young Master Chu." The one-eyed middle-aged man was very surprised. Then, he regretted it. He had never thought that Chu Yang would have such an identity. Otherwise, he wouldn't have acted so perfunctorily before. "I didn't expect this. I really didn't expect this. Young Master Chu is so low-key despite his identity. Such a person is easy to get along with, but I actually missed the opportunity to befriend such a person. What a pity, what a pity." The more the one-eyed middle-aged man was surprised, the more regretful he felt. Sun Yong'an's expression became more unsightly, and his heart was filled with hatred. Chapter 581. Such a grand welcome, such enthusiasm, and such a smile. Just like in his previous life, it could be seen that the merry pavilion had spent a lot of effort. Monster Chu Yang is indeed extraordinary. Second Fatty Jin led Chu Yang inside and naturally saw Chu Yang's appearance. Facing such a scene, Chu Yang was not too surprised. His expression was very casual, as if this was a common occurrence. On the other hand, the little beast on his shoulder rolled its transparent eyes. It was very curious about everything in front of it. The two quickly walked past Sun Yong'an and the others. Sun Yong'an and the others could not enter any further. In the blink of an eye, they had walked a few li. These few li of corridors were inlaid with huge pearls. The pearls' light illuminated the entire corridor, making it magnificent and luxurious to the extreme. Suddenly, a pink-clothed girl came from afar. She bent her slender waist and walked with light steps, revealing her white wrists under a light muslin. Her eyes were clear and bright like spring water, tender and delicate like jade, tender and beautiful like a flower. Her fingers were like chopped green onions, her mouth was like a vermilion pill, every frown and smile moved the heart and soul. Her smile was innately charming. Step by step she walked over, swaying her butt. Chu Yang suddenly felt a fragrance assailing his nostrils, and immediately fell into a pink state. Just as it was about to become blurry, his genius martial spirit shook, and he immediately broke free. This girl's charm is very strong. If I did not have a powerful martial spirit, I would have lost my mind. Chu Yang couldn't help but carefully size up this woman again. Her purple strapless long skirt was lightly draped with purple muslin, exposing her shoulders. Inside the purple muslin, there was a brilliant purple flower on the light purple silk. Her snow-white jade-like skin was as white as a freshly peeled egg. Her long hair hung down to her waist and draped over her shoulders. Her long eyelashes were drooping, making her look a little melancholy. Her charm made her melancholy look even more pitiful. Her tall and small nose was breathing rhythmically, and her thin, bright pink lips were curled into a beautiful arc. Her body was also emitting a fragrance. This pink-clothed girl looked at Chu Yang with slight surprise, then smiled and said, "This must be young Master Chu, it seems like this is your first time here. Missy, this is the thigh that I have to hug in the future, the great monster Chu. This is the first time my boss has come to Jinyuan City. So far, no one in your merry pavilion has caught my boss's eye." Second Fatty Jin beamed, "Missy, you have to work hard. Also, my boss was not bewitched by you at all. Missy, are you going to devote yourself to him? Boss?" Missy was a little surprised when she heard this. Then, she smiled and said, "Young Marquis, I'm afraid that your big brother won't like me and will think that I'm a withered flower." Second Fatty Jin nodded in agreement. "That's very possible. Missy, you're at my level, so it's very possible that boss won't take a liking to you." She was stunned and rolled her eyes at Second Fatty Jin. He was just being modest. After that, she opened her mouth and said, "Young Marquis, is it the same old place?" "Of course, but the level has to be raised. Otherwise, it would seem that this lackey is not doing his best. Also, prepare 1,000 girls." When Second Fatty Jin said 1,000 girls, Missy did not take it to heart. Instead, she observed and sized up Chu Yang again and again. When she realized that she could not see through Chu Yang's cultivation level, she was even more surprised and led the way in front. Chapter 582. In the center of the hall, there were dozens of dancing women. There were also dozens of musicians playing all kinds of musical instruments. Young Marquis, young Master Chu, please. Miss E stopped in her tracks and pushed open the door. Inside was a serene and elegant room that was more than 200 square meters. Miss E, there's good food and drink. You have to be more attentive than usual. It's best if you serve me personally. Second Fatty Jin finally revealed a knowing smile. Young Marquis, don't worry. She immediately left. Only Chu Yang and Second Fatty Jin were left in the serene and elegant room. Second Fatty. Chu Yang lazily reclined on the soft chair and said, "Where's the glowing and pitch-black treasure?" He didn't have time to enjoy it right now. TCH. Second Fatty Jin rolled his eyes and said with disdain, "I say, Monster Chu, do you really need me to teach you how to write it? Haste makes waste. There's food, drink, and girls. What else are you not satisfied with? Eat well and play well. The auction and gambling battles will be more interesting later." After a pause, Second Fatty Jin judged Chu Yang, "Monster Chu, your life is simply too boring. Auction and gambling battles?" Chu Yang was speechless. He was indeed a bit too impatient. Second Fatty Jin naturally wouldn't bring him here for no reason. If he was too impatient, everyone would know what he was impatient for, and the price would naturally be very high. As for the auction, the money he obtained from robbing the Burning Sky Saint Sun and the Five Elements Divine Sun should be enough for him to do so. He immediately relaxed and enjoyed himself to his heart's content. Suddenly, he felt that his state of mind had changed. Leaving the Five Elements sect and arriving at Jinyuan City, everything flashed before his eyes. This was completely different from when he was in the Five Elements sect, where he was constantly facing danger and desperately cultivating. He felt as if he had suddenly returned from the city to the countryside, going from a fast pace to a slow pace. Amidst the sounds of the merry pavilion, he was completely relaxed. His heart suddenly calmed down, and all kinds of thoughts appeared in his mind. Cultivating the heart in the secular world. People said, the secular world is filled with different forms of life. One's heart becomes 10,000 hearts, and the heart reflects the secular world. Chu Yang was in a hurry to break through the 8th or 9th level of the Chi Soul stage. He was in a hurry to break through the barrier of the heavens and become a 4th level array master. He had a request. Every request was bitter. If you cling to something, that thing will hurt you. If you cling to someone, that person will hurt you. The more you ask for it, the more you can't get it. Everything felt like a dream. It was all just wishful thinking. It was better to let it go. Chu Yang's state of mind calmed down and indulged himself in plate after plate of rare delicacies and fine wine. The instant he temporarily let go of his obsession, his state of mind was like a small boat that rose and fell in the sea of bitterness, and also like a pure heart that rose and fell in the muddy world of the mortal world. The small boat was never swallowed up, and the pure heart of a child was never tainted. On the other hand, the barrier of the heavens was being attacked by impermanence, all kinds of sins, and all kinds of karma. It was also being tainted by the mortal world. If the heavens had feelings, they would grow old. If the heavens had feelings, they would no longer be the heavens. If the barrier of heaven was tainted by the mortal world, it would no longer be a barrier of heaven, but a barrier of the mortal world. It seemed that it could break through at any time, but Chu Yang did not do so. To be more precise, he seemed to have forgotten about this matter. He seemed to have truly let go of his obsession. Chu Yang suddenly sang at the top of his voice. Mistakenly entering the Wu Mountain, unable to sleep at night, finding the clouds to cover my eyes. The ancients said that the path of Shu was difficult, but they didn't know that the wood was even more difficult. The green bamboo bent with the wind, breaking continuously in the storm. When the clouds were light and the wind was light, it would be firm and leisurely again. Facing the dead water and the rotten fish beach, fortunately, there are always fish to accompany. Changing the clear and virtuous nostrils, only the moonlight can be seen in the bottom of the eyes. Drinking 3,000 cups of turbid wine, lying drunk in the East Sea, secretly sharpening the sword. Cutting down the everlasting pine trees of the South Mountain, refining the blazing flames to burn the blue sky. Chapter 583. What's wrong with him all of a sudden? Chu Yang suddenly recited a poem. It looked as if he was full of talent and had a very knowledgeable appearance. It was so high-end and high-class. Second Fatty Jin was very unhappy. When he saw Lil Guari, whose claws were covered in oil and whose belly was round like a ball, staring straight at Chu Yang, he couldn't help but feel confused. Could it be that a demon has appeared on the great monster Chu's body? Fatty too squinted his eyes. Suddenly, his eyes, which were covered by his fat, were revealed. His eyes were as big as copper bells. He also felt that the aura on Chu Yang's body had become very mysterious. No way, this is really like seeing a ghost. Lord Fatty just casually let out a smelly fart and this turtle bastard had an epiphany after smelling it. Fatty too couldn't help but curse in his heart. Lord Fatty smells my own farts all day. How come I've never had an epiphany before? What especially irritated him was that when Chu Yang was having an epiphany, he was extremely lazy and leisurely. That kind of laziness and leisure had reached the extreme, making others envious and jealous. In any case, Fatty too wanted to immediately punch Chu Yang. Exclamation point. Fatty too couldn't help but curse in his heart. He really is a monster. He's even more ridiculous and scary than Fatty too described him. It's not an epiphany. Fatty too, you don't need to keep quiet. That will make you look very tasteless. Fatty too was scared by Chu Yang's lazy words. His eyes almost fell out of their sockets as he looked at Chu Yang as if he had seen a ghost. Great monster Chu, I took it seriously. Do as you wish. Chu Yang smiled, however, you have to be careful. I also welcome it. It's rare to see a fatty like you being so careful. My, Lord Fatty is sincerely doing this for your own good, but I'm being mocked. Fatty too was angry. He stood up and shouted towards the door, go call Ju Baoshui over. Fatty too, can you speak a bit louder? Could it be that your anger is only this much? Chu Yang's leisurely appearance, the way he spoke freely and distracted without affecting anything, really made second Fatty Jin feel suffocated. Is there any justice in this world? I don't believe it. He roared again, hurry up, I'm going to flip out. Not long after, a white-clothed, white-haired old man arrived. He bowed to second Fatty Jin and said with a smile, young Marquis, what orders do you have for me? Do you know the rules? This is my boss. Second Fatty Jin pointed at Chu Yang, this is my boss. In the future, when you see the two of us, you have to greet my boss first, then me. The white-robed elder was taken aback for a moment before he said, young Marquis, I am truly sorry. This is young Master Chu's first time here and this Jew has not been thorough enough. Saying this, the old man bowed to Chu Yang and said, this old man is the manager of the Merry Pavilion, Ju-san. Greetings to young Master Chu. Chu Yang did not neglect and hurriedly cupped his hands in return. Old mister, you are too kind. Don't listen to this fatty's nonsense. From the beginning to the end, the mysterious aura on Chu Yang's body did not disappear. This made second Fatty Jin mutter in his heart, is it really not the least bit useful? Is this thing even human? He was depressed, but continued to ask, Ju Baoshui, are there any earth attribute treasures in this auction? Second Fatty Jin cultivated the 100,000 mountain flesh secret art, so he naturally needed earth attribute treasures. Replying to young Marquis, of course there are, and there are quite a few. Are there any fire and metal attribute treasures? Fire breeds earth, earth breeds metal. The two were related, so second Fatty Jin naturally needed them. Of course there are. Then are there any light and dark attribute treasures? Saying this, second Fatty Jin looked at Chu Yang. Of course there are. The old man said, young Marquis, the Merry Pavilion's auction does not have everything, but there are many types of treasures. Young Marquis can rest assured. When it came to light and dark attribute treasures, Chu Yang's mysterious aura did not fluctuate in the slightest. Second Fatty Jin was convinced and said gloomily, I say, great monster Chu Yang, you are amazing. Chapter 584. The old man Ju-san retreated from the private room, moving cautiously along the way. Not long after, he flashed into a hidden space. Inside, there was smoke and mist, and a fragrance assailed his nostrils. It seemed to be a woman's boudoir. There was no one inside, but a voice came out of nowhere. "How is that, Chu Yang?" Ju San respectfully knelt on the ground, not daring to raise his head. "Unfathomable, I can't see how deep he is." "Oh." It was hard to tell whether the voice was male or female, but it clearly revealed a trace of surprise. "You have such a high opinion of him." "My strength is shallow and my eyesight is limited. I shouldn't have been able to see many of Chu Yang's shocking aspects, so I've underestimated his judgment." He recalled again. Second Fatty Jin had actually joked about Chu Yang's epiphany. His heart couldn't help but fiercely jump, and he immediately recounted everything he had seen and heard. "Just now, I was specially called by the young Marquis. First, it was to ask about the treasures in the auction, and second, the young Marquis wanted to use me to interfere with Chu Yang's epiphany. The latter was his main goal. Interfere with Chu Yang's epiphany." The person in the dark couldn't help but cry out in surprise. A martial practitioner's epiphany was extremely precious, and he had actually joked about it. Such an inconceivable matter was truly unheard of. "Are you sure?" He still couldn't believe it. Ju San said with extreme certainty, "I'm extremely sure, there's nothing false about it. The young Marquis exclaimed in front of me, and said that Chu Yang wasn't human." "Was that Chu Yang's epiphany disturbed?" "No." Ju San's voice was thick with shock. "This is also what this old servant is most shocked about. Chu Yang was in an epiphany, but he was able to talk and laugh with others without being affected in the slightest. The mysterious aura that came from his epiphany didn't have the slightest trace of fluctuation from beginning to end. It was like an unending river that would never be cut off. It was unbelievable." The person in the dark couldn't help but fall silent. After a while, he slowly said, "Is there anything else?" The young Marquis' words seemed to only care about earth, fire, and metal-type treasures, but I found that he actually cared more about light and dark-type treasures. "I understand, you may leave." "Yes." The old man left on Wednesday, and shortly after, the girl who had charmed Chu Yang, appeared. Beside her was a person whose face was covered. Because of the deliberate concealment, it was impossible to tell whether the person was male or female. "Do you believe me now? When I tried to charm him, it was completely useless. At most, he seemed to be stunned by me." Misty frowned and said, "Assassinate Chu Yang. This mission cannot be accepted. Even if I can't accept it, I must accept it." The masked man coldly said, "This is a mission entrusted to us by the Soul Devourer clan. Once we kill Chu Yang and expose this matter, the relationship between the Five Elements sect and the Soul Devourer clan will worsen. They might even fight to the death and start a war. This is what His Majesty hopes to see the most." This Majesty was the Emperor of the Wei nation, the King of Wei. The King of Wei had great ambitions. He wanted to first unify the other three nations, then destroy the Five Elements sect, the Soul Devourer clan, the Longhu sect, and the Seven Stars sect. Finally, he wanted to unify the entire Eastern Wilderness and achieve a hegemony like the Eastern Wilderness. Therefore, he tried his best to weaken the strength of the Five Elements sect, the Soul Devourer clan, and the other three sects, causing them to fight among themselves. In these past few years, the Soul Devourer clan had been extremely overbearing, and the relationship between the four sects had become very bad. What if the assassination fails and we can't kill Chu Yang? Chapter 585. The Merry Pavilion wasn't just a simple money-making tool. It was also a place where King Wei collected information and monitored the four sects. It was also an assassination organization that carried out assassinations and many other missions. Chu Yang was assassinated at the Merry Pavilion, and the Merry Pavilion couldn't escape responsibility. Reputation was a small matter, but if the Merry Pavilion was suspected of being the mastermind, the matter couldn't be resolved. Once the secret of the Merry Pavilion was exposed, the Wei Kingdom and King Wei would become the public enemy of the four sects. There was such a possibility, and the masked man didn't say anything. The Soul Devourer clan wants to kill Chu Yang. Even if we don't make a move, they will definitely make a move. Missy spoke again. You are just worried that if we don't make a move, we won't be able to find evidence and get hold of the Soul Devourer clan's weakness. But have you ever thought that the Soul Devourer clan didn't think of this? How could they let us succeed? I even suspect that they already know our identities. Your thoughts are exactly what they are thinking. The masked man's body couldn't help but tremble. If he assassinated Chu Yang, the Soul Devourer clan would act like a mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the Oriole behind. This would cause the Five Elements sect and the Wei kingdom to become enemies. What would the consequences be? Third Princess, please reconsider this matter. Misty suddenly became respectful and knelt down. She also revealed the masked man's identity. It was the princess of the Wei kingdom. If Third Princess insists, please ask the Crown Prince or King Wei for instructions. After a moment of silence, the Wei kingdom's Third Princess said leisurely, I want to kill Chu Yang and sow discord between the Five Elements sect and the Soul Devourer clan. What I am most worried about now is that if Chu Yang is so monstrous, the Emperor Island's inheritance might fall into his hands. Misty couldn't help but frown. The Eastern Wilderness's great emperor had a close relationship with the Five Elements sect. This was indeed very likely, and this might be the reason why the Soul Devourer clan wanted to kill Chu Yang. Let's check out this Chu Yang's background first. Previously, we didn't pay any attention to this Chu Yang, so we don't know anything about him. The Soul Devourer clan suddenly found us and asked us to accept this mission. They gave us very vague information about Chu Yang. They only said that he was a peerless freak, but they didn't say anything about how freakish he was. The Third Princess of the Wei kingdom clearly agreed with this judgment and immediately said, Are you saying to let the Marquis of Rong Nation go and investigate? The Marquis of Rong Nation and the Marquis of Fu Nation were both able to earn money for the King of Wei. In the end, they were conferred the title of Marquis. However, the two of them were competitors and had a bad relationship. Their descendants had always been at odds with each other. Not bad. The Third Princess of Wei Kingdom nodded. That's all for now. When the Wei Kingdom's Third Princess was paying attention to Chu Yang was oblivious. In the elegant room, Second Fatty Jin said with a smile, I say, Great Freak Chu, I have a fake friend who has an incomplete cultivation technique. Can you take a look? Chu Yang smiled. He knew that this was probably because of the 100,000 mountain meat technique. He smiled. You think I have this ability? You are Great Freak Chu, not a human. If you don't have this ability, who does? It seemed like she was praising Chu Yang, but it was more like she was scolding him. I really admire your eyesight. Nonsense. Second Fatty Jin was extremely proud. Great Freak Chu, if you don't have this ability, how can I fawn over you? Don't you know what kind of person I am? You are a pile of meat. So you agree. Which eye of yours saw that I agreed? My eyes of fat saw when you despised them. Chu Yang looked at the fat around Second Fatty Jin and said, Although what you said makes sense, please note that I have never despised a pig for being fat. So what I despise is not the fat on your body, but you. Ah, pooh. Second Fatty Jin cursed. Great Freak Chu, you are the pig. Chapter 586. Not long after, the person that Second Fatty Jin said was the richest hypocrite appeared in front of Chu Yang. He wore a white scholar's robe and held an elegant fan in his hand. His appearance was beautiful, his face was white, and his eyes were like lightning under a rock. He was 7 feet 8 inches tall, and his figure was very elegant, making people sigh in admiration. He looked solemn and straightforward. This was a handsome man. His words and actions were appropriate, and his actions were very elegant. Greetings, Brother Jin. The first thing he did was greet Second Fatty Jin in a very polite manner. This made Second Fatty Jin very unhappy. The fat on his eyes suddenly tore open as he glared at him. Liu Haoran, do you believe that I won't beat you? If you want to beat me, you should at least give me a reason. As he spoke, he also bowed to Chu Yang in a very formal manner, making Chu Yang feel very uncomfortable. I am Liu Haoran. Greetings, Brother Chu. I really admire you for being so formal all day. Anyways, I can't do it, although I am very envious of your upbringing. Haha. When Chu Yang spoke, Second Fatty Jin couldn't help but burst out laughing. Liu Haoran was very gentle and elegant. He cupped his hands and smiled. Brother Chu is the same as Brother Jin. Both of you are very straightforward and unrestrained. You really make people envious. Hypocrite, stop being so serious. Second Fatty Jin really couldn't stand Liu Haoran's extremely polite and harmonious appearance. He roared, hurry up and take out your broken hand seal. Let this inhuman person see it. Liu Haoran was already used to Second Fatty Jin's behavior, so he didn't mind. He took out an incomplete book and handed it to Chu Yang with both hands. I'll have to trouble Brother Chu. His words were clear and unhurried. This was a person that you couldn't easily find fault with. It was also very hard to dislike him. Chu Yang smiled, took the incomplete book, and flipped through it. There was a detailed description of the overturning heaven seal. It was said to come from an ancient myth. At the beginning of the world was not stable. Mountains, rivers, lakes, the sun, the moon, and the stars had not yet been born. The creatures that were born at the beginning of the world were extremely powerful. With a flip of their hands, they could turn the entire world upside down. The sky was below and the earth was above. Turbid chi poured down in torrents while clear chi rushed down from the sky. The two collided, recreating the chaos. Later generations created the overturning heaven seal according to this legend. In the incomplete version, the key to the sky-throwing seal was a celestial visualization diagram. Only celestials had the ability to turn the world upside down. However, this celestial being visualization diagram was severely damaged. Phew, Second Fatty, do you really think that I'm omnipotent? You want me to recreate the celestial being visualization diagram again? As Chu Yang spoke, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. When Chu Yang was trying to visualize a celestial being, the golden origin suddenly poured into his spiritual world. Soon after, a golden celestial being appeared. He raised his hand and flipped it over. Rumble. His entire spiritual world was turned upside down. The sky was below and the earth was above. The earth, mountains, lakes, sun, moon, and stars all poured down. Although the world existed, everything was destroyed and returned to chaos. At this moment, Chu Yang's spiritual world seemed to have been destroyed and died. He suddenly lost all of his vitality and aura. Yaya. Lil Guori was the first to notice. What's going on? Second Fatty Jin and Liu Haoran were also shocked. However, in an instant, they noticed that there was a hazy chaos between Chu Yang's eyebrows. Soon after, a ray of light seemed to appear. Chu Yang's vitality and aura immediately recovered. It was weak, but it gradually grew stronger, and then it became extremely strong. A powerful spiritual energy rushed out. In a short moment, Chu Yang only felt that he had experienced the destruction of the world and then returned to chaos. After that, the chaos gave birth to everything, and he came back to life. Chapter 587. Rumble. After the sky-throwing seal, the Golden Deva demonstrated another seal technique. When the seal was completed, he raised his hand and collapsed the sky. Heaven and earth were destroyed again. This time, his spiritual power was not destroyed, but like the Golden Deva who was seriously injured by the collapse of the sky, he suddenly became weak and dispirited. The Golden Deva recovered from his injuries, and his spiritual power recovered and soared again. In the spiritual world, a big hole was opened in the sky. The Golden Deva performed another seal technique and raised his hand to mend the sky. Sky-throwing seal. Sky-throwing seal. Sky-repairing seal. This was the spiritual cultivation method of the Golden Elder's lineage, and it was also a peerless seal technique. Slaughter seal. After that, in the spiritual world, the Golden Deva slaughtered thousands of creatures. He slapped out with his big hand, and thousands of golden rays flickered. 3-inch-long sabers, swords, halberds, spears, wheels, trigrams, and other weapons were condensed by golden light. They were chaotic and misty, as if they were divine weapons born from chaos. Thousands of them gathered together, forming a sea of golden weapons and a golden storm. The momentum was so great that it slaughtered thousands of creatures, everything came to an abrupt end. It seemed that the Golden Deva had angered heaven and earth one after another because he had slaughtered all living beings and was finally destroyed by heaven and earth. This is the inheritance of the Golden Origin, Chuyang knew very well. He had thought hard before, but he never thought that the inheritance was hidden in the Golden Origin. The Deva in the incomplete book was not on the same level as the Golden Deva in Chuyang's consciousness. The gap between the two was huge. Therefore, it was easy to complete the incomplete celestial visualization painting in the incomplete book. Pop! Chuyang pointed his finger in the void. His finger was the pen, his spiritual energy was the ink, and the void was the paper. According to the severely damaged lines of the incomplete book, he restored the celestial visualization painting. It was easy. It was as if Chuyang had seen a real dragon and then painted a flood dragon that was almost the same as a real dragon. Buzz! After the celestial visualization painting was completely outlined by Chuyang in the void, a burst of dazzling light suddenly burst out. The void trembled and buzzed, as if the Deva had not just been constructed, but had crossed the void and appeared in front of him. Sky-flipping seal. With a thought from Chuyang, the celestial in the void flipped his hand. Instantly, a divine mountain appeared, toppling over. When the divine mountain collapsed, the sky collapsed, and the stars fell. It was a world-ending disaster. The room began to tremble and shake. Fatty Jin and Liu Haoran felt as if the entire room was about to be flipped over. They felt as if their entire bodies were about to be flipped upside down. Their feet and heads were plunged straight into the ground. In their perception, the world had really flipped over and covered them. The cataclysmic seal in the incomplete book was actually completely different from the one in the Gold Inheritance. The ability of the celestial being he visualized was limited. He was unable to overturn the sky, but he could overturn a mountain and overturn a mountain. Therefore, rather than calling it the sky flipping seal, it was better to call it the mountain flipping seal. However, its power was equally astonishing. When the sky flipping seal was unleashed, it could overturn a divine mountain, collapse the sky, and sink the earth. Therefore, to use the sky flipping seal, one would need the mountain martial spirit or the mountain martial spirit's visualization diagram. Hiss! Fatty Jin couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. From the time Chuyang deduced the sky flipping seal to the time it was fully displayed, it took less than a quarter of an hour. Chuyang had already deduced the entire sky flipping seal, and even displayed it to perfection. Is this something that a capable person can do? He was really doubtful. The sky flipping seal had been in the mind of a hypocrite for who knows how long. Not to mention perfection, the hypocrite had been studying it for so many years, but he hadn't been able to figure out anything. Liu Haoran's expression wouldn't change even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, and his eyes wouldn't blink even if a deer appeared on the left. His cultivation was extremely good, he didn't panic in the face of trouble, and remained calm as if there was nothing in the world that could make him pale with fright. However, at this moment, he was also dumbstruck, and his face turned pale with fright. This. He was actually speechless. In the end, Liu Haoran's cultivation was extremely high. He immediately calmed down and thought to himself, this Chuyang is so extraordinary. Perhaps there really is going to be a good show at the Merry Pavilion. In Fatty Jin's words, he was the richest hypocrite. How could the richest hypocrite not know about the news? Chapter 588. In just a few minutes, Chuyang had deduced the sky-flipping seal. Second Fatty Jin raised the level of Chuyang's inhuman stage again and began to attack Liu Haoran. Hypocrite, I'm so pure. Do you think I lied to you? I told you to meet an inhuman scum. Do you believe me now? Liu Haoran ignored Second Fatty Jin and thanked Chuyang solemnly. Thank you, Brother Chu. You must be feeling uncomfortable. Second Fatty Jin said before Chuyang could. Don't bother with this hypocrite. He'll feel uncomfortable if he doesn't do this. Moreover, he'll be able to wash away the shame of the Liu family. The shame of the Liu family was actually involved like this. Chuyang touched his nose. Second Fatty, there's a limit to your exaggeration. Bullshit. Second Fatty Jin was furious. Master Fatty, I'm telling the truth. That hypocrite sold his precious baby when his family's fortune fell. Although he managed to get it back in the end, he ended up in this state. His grandfather felt ashamed to face his ancestors, so he didn't dare to die. Now that the news has spread, I guarantee that he'll die immediately. Second Fatty is telling the truth. Liu Haoran didn't mind Second Fatty Jin's words at all. He thanked him sincerely again. Thank you, Brother Chu. He immediately ordered someone to send the complete sky-flipping seal back. Then, the news of the old man's return came, but Liu Haoran didn't leave. Chu Yang was speechless. Brother Liu, it's not appropriate for you not to go back and send the old man off. Filial piety is the most important virtue. Liu Haoran didn't have any intention of moving. I'm being filial to him by staying here. If I go back now, he'll probably jump out of his coffin. Chu Feiren, stop your bullshit. Master Fatty's friends are all top-notch. Second Fatty Jin was very proud and arrogant. Chu Yang couldn't accept this. Just as he was about to speak, a burst of laughter came from outside. Ha ha ha. The voice was loud and clear, echoing throughout the merry house. Hearing this laughter, Second Fatty Jin's face, which was originally proud, suddenly darkened. Second Fatty Jin. That sound rang out again. Every single private room could hear it clearly. Quite a few distinguished guests began to listen curiously. Today, you wish to help your good friend Chu Yang obtain a light attribute treasure? The speaker continued to laugh wildly. Ha ha ha, I can tell you right now that it's impossible. You might as well tell that Chu Yang to come over and bow to me. Today, I'll give him this light and darkness attribute treasure. Wu Guanqi. Second Fatty Jin suddenly roared. What? That person sneered. Are you angry? You useless thing. Second Fatty Jin was already stomping his feet. Haha, I'm so angry. That person became even more proud. Unfortunately, it's useless. Now, your Marquis Fu is already a pauper. Second Fatty Jin coldly snorted and no longer paid attention to the provocation outside. This person mocked Second Fatty Jin several times, but Second Fatty Jin didn't respond and didn't continue. Chu Yang's heart trembled. Could it be that the entire world knew that he was in urgent need of light-type treasures? That was impossible. He couldn't help but narrow his eyes and say, what is this thing? Can you explain its functions and main uses? Second Fatty Jin cursed loudly. Didn't I just call out that bastard's name? Wu Guanqi, the young Marquis of Ronghua Marquis Fu. Chu Yang frowned slightly. Fu of Ronghua Marquis? He didn't offend you. He narrowed his eyes and said lazily, everyone is a young Marquis. Why are you called a pauper? Second Fatty Jin was furious. Chu Feiren, you're the pauper. What pig ears do you have? Can't you tell that this is an obvious slander? Fu of Ronghua Marquis Fu of Ronghua Marquis Fu of Ronghua Marquis Fu has fallen out of favor. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.